Hold up. He did not. No. 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 God damn it. This man. Hello everyone, I'm live on Twitch. Come watch me swing into action or watch as I swing and miss into the newest fake servant's DX. Oh man, I'm giving him a hug when he comes back. That's amazing. Alright. Day 2. Part 2. Witch on the Holy Night. Saw that I already have. Let me check something. Welcome back to my stream if you're the same from yesterday, because I can't tell. I might have to go retread a little bit because my Twitch did not record all of the stream, sadly. From my 2.5 hour streams, I was only able to get 48 minutes of the first part, which means I'm gonna have to go back, sadly, so I can have the full playthrough on my YouTube channel, which is just starting up really slowly, but I'm just here to relax, live a good life, share some moments with everyone else. So, I believe it's archived that I could see it. Yeah, here it is. What is that? What are those, cows? Oh. I'm gonna experiment just a little bit. Let's try this. Oh, there we go. Whoa, okay. Jesus Christ, that goes fast. Okay, I remember it's somewhere around here. I hate those footsteps so much. Okay. I will actually have to look at something real quick before I continue. I don't know if it was here that my Twitch stream decided to friggin' die. Or at least the connection to the actual Twitch service. So I'm gonna go and find out where I was last at. Oh my god, those footsteps. It sounds so weird. Okay.
なんて絶望的な断絶。
I don't know if it was here though. Oh, it can go back too. What's that? Oh god. I don't know if it was here though. This is. I am very sorry that I'm just jumping over the place. I'm just trying to find out where I was. It's not here.
電気が
Oh, hold up. Okay, here we are. Found where we were. We are back on track. And I have to read through all this all over again. Oh well. Wouldn't hurt anybody because I want to get this completed on my channel and everything. I'm gonna close my door. Alright. Everyone grab your popcorn, grab your drinks. Since this is a kinetic novel, not a visual, kinetic novel. Sit, relax, hear my boring ass voice. And here we go. She walked along the hallway, the rain pattering in the background. The meeting room was already in sight. With a furrowed brow, she fixed her long hair in anticipation of meeting the unknown stranger from within. Her elegant strides were like those of a confident general going into battle.
いや、青崎くん、君を信頼してる僕だけど、念のため確認しておくよ。なんていうか、優しくね。できれば笑顔とか作れないかな。
作り笑いは苦手です。一応努力しているつもりですが。
ああ、そうなんだ。それはよかった。
Now, since I've already read this, or at least the first part, I'm not gonna be as I'm not gonna react as much since I've already read through it and it's still fresh in my mind. But I don't really don't really have a problem with it at the moment, to be honest. I need to check my Twitch stream on my laptop, making sure I don't die at some point, because Twitch is really screwing with me.
いやー、ほんとよかった。青崎くんにも苦手なものってあったんだね。
To reiterate, no one's good at everything. It's okay. Again, those awful effects for the footsteps. Mr. Yamashiro's shoulders slumped the second they reached the meeting room. As he put his hand to the door, his eyes seemed to say to her, "Be nice, please." This only made her more irritated.
分かってるわよ。愛想が悪いってのは。でも笑顔なんて意識して作るものじゃないんだし。だいたいそういうインスタントな人付き合いなら飛び丸の方が向いてるってね。
She sighed about her social shortcomings, but then it occurred to her that being called into school on a day off while sleep-deprived wasn't anything to smile about anyway. She also thought the person responsible for this mess would be better off attending elementary school. It might not be his fault, but neither was it her duty or obligation to do the teacher's work for them. At the very least, they could have used their brains and organized all this on a normal school day. Another complaint she wanted to voice later.
いや、というか敵。なんであろうと敵。悪いけど、情状酌量以前に敵。間が悪いのはお互い様っていうか、ほんと、なんでよりにもよってこんな忙しい時に。
Hey, it happens. Her pounding headache from a lack of sleep had boosted her aggression by 10%. No matter how harmless the guy on the other side of the door may be, anyone who disturbed her sleep was the enemy. And just as she was reaching peak annoyance, Mr. Yamashiro opened the door to the meeting room. The room slowly slid into view. She didn't care for formalities, just looked straight ahead and stormed into the room, and found herself face to face with a most unusual opponent. Before we go on, let's see from another perspective. Turning back the clock just a little. You don't have to do anything. For some, these words are a priceless luxury. For others, they are unbearable torture. For the proactive girl, it was definitely the former, though she'd be too suspicious of the motives of anyone giving her such a gift to accept it. For the passive boy, it was definitely the latter, a bitter thorn that made him homesick, though at this very moment his mind was still distracted with the wait for his face to reveal any discontent. He maintained perfect posture as he stared at the gray sky. He had already waited a whole hour, but figured they must have had their reasons for making him wait. And as long as he had the sound of the rain, and as long as he had the sound of the rain to soothe him, he could keep on waiting.
でも、そろそろ9時を過ぎるのか。どうなんだろう。
He had been vaguely keeping track of the time as he listened to the rain. Due to the holiday, the school building was completely silent, except for the patter of the rain on the window. The mood felt as damp as the air. It was then he heard the heavy clatter of footsteps approaching.
よかった。忘れられているかと思った。
He could hear two sets of footsteps, one heavier set belonging to an adult. He breathed a sigh of relief as the door slid open.
すまないね。ずいぶんとお待たせしちゃって。
The first person he saw was a man wearing glasses and an awkward smile. That's Mr. Yamashiro, the one who brought me here.
って、あれ？里中先生いないんですか？ひどいなあ。話し相手になってあげてと言ったのに。
Deadbeat, dead for nothing, freaking teacher. Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, looking increasingly apologetic. And then, from behind him, with a tight-lipped expression that made it clear she didn't want to be there, a dark-haired girl with a determined look in her eyes appeared. Sojiro gulped. The sound of the rain on the window faded into nothingness. That's when he knew. This was how it felt when time stood still. She blinked quickly a few times as if taken aback. Why was anyone's guess? The boy was everything she expected a naive country boy to look like. However, she felt something she couldn't understand. That music. I love those notes right there. Da, da, da. That's just, I love it. His eyes widened slightly as if taken aback. The reason was obvious. Putting his feeling into words was a different matter altogether. So we will never know exactly what he experienced in that moment. This fourth wall breaking, I swear to God. Who is telling the story? I want to know that. Is it Zelrich? That's when it hit him. He sensed he'd been touched by the hands of destiny.
"で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
More like you called her and forced her out of her friggin' sleeping. His voice and the sound of the rain seemed distant. This is how they first met. Such was their start, for better or worse. Like the ephemeral beauty of fireworks. It was commonly believed among the students that Aoko was always in a foul mood. But this gossip was 90% prejudice, as Aoko simply didn't have time to be irritated 24/7. The reality was she simply didn't want to explain herself all the time, and therefore seemed angry about something, obvious or not. This idle gossip did, however, lead to her earning the title of one of the school's 7 deadly threats. The remaining 10% of the gossip was right on the mark. Aoko herself often had the feeling that her tendency to feel animosity toward harmless things was akin to what a chronic headache sufferer might experience. Today fell under that 10%. For today her anger was pure, and her childish and selfish display was befitting of her actual age. The meeting room was dimly lit, awash in the colors of the rain. To reduce the electricity costs, school regulations forbid the use of lights during the day. This was the setting the 3 of them found themselves in. Her first impression was that his calm demeanor reminded her of a field of wildflowers. In spite of his perfect posture, he seemed subdued and frail. And though describing him as meek would be going too far, at the very least he was passive. Even through his uniform, she could see that he was thinner than average. His dark hair was unkempt, and he came across as a wholly forgettable boy. If she had to look at him in a more positive light, she would describe him more a young man than a boy. It was his calm demeanor that made him seem more mature. Was that the cause of Aoko's reasonless reaction? He seemed almost too at home in the meeting room, and she was left with the impression that it was her and the teacher, not this outsider, who were the guests here. She felt an unidentifiable aggravation building within her, almost as if her right to be here was in question. Aoko felt herself raising her natural defenses.
信じられない。私、今わけもなく怒ってない。
Depends how you look at it. She hated not understanding things, her own emotions in particular. It pained her less than you would imagine for a perfectionist like her, but it still nagged her like a thorn in her side. Excuse me.
いやーほら青崎くん挨拶してあげなくちゃ。
Mr. Yamashita's attempt to relieve the tension was equally irritating.
挨拶。
After casting a nasty glance in the teacher's direction, Aoko turned to face the boy. From an outsider's perspective, it might have looked like a stare down. And in that instant, the culmination of her emotional state hurtled toward the innocent boy and skewered him.
Yeah, 待たせたね、しずきくん。
Hearing his name, Sojiro came to his senses. His stunned gaze shook loose. He took a deep breath to clear his head. Chalking it up to nerves, Mr. Yamashita broke out a smile and turned to the girl standing beside him.
紹介するよ。彼が転入生のしずき宗十郎くん。で、こっちの彼女がしずきくんの案内役。うちの生徒会長で休日を押して新しい仲間の案内役を買って出てくれた青崎青子くんだ。
Having been introduced by Mr. Yamashita, the girl took a step forward. Her eyes were merciless. Her stare, an unspoken threat to violently trample her opponent. Sojiro, on the other hand, managed to keep his own composure despite the shock at how confrontational she appeared. He had never been greeted quite like this before, but supposed, mistakenly, that this was how people treated each other in the city. The exchange must have looked quite dramatic to an onlooker. A girl ready to brawl. An earnest country boy desperate to understand. It was a murderous limbo, especially for anyone in the room with them. Like Mr. Yamashiro, for example. Well, he had thought he had made the right decision in choosing an honor student to help him out. She was in an inexplicably bad mood, and the tension in the air was undeniable. It was this moment that he realized his failure. His realization had come far too late. One false move, and this girl, for whom no problem was too large, would be becoming a storm that would rock the very foundations of the school. Just as the almighty Joker card could bring either fortune or disaster, the sole teacher who had been present at the time would come to bear the blame for the scandal that ensued.
ああ、うん、いけてる。二人とも気は合うようだね。それじゃあ、僕はこの辺でいいかな。
Mr. Yamashiro laughed nervously as he crept toward the door.
僕は職員室にいるから、終わったら来るように。いいかい、青崎くん。くれぐれもだぜ。なんていうか、生徒会長としての度量の広さをこの際僕に信じさせてほしいかな。
Mr. Yamashiro left, leaving the two in a locked-eyed state, wondering which one set of eyes was doing all the glaring. All that remained in the room was a naive boy and a cross-armed guarded girl. The two lingered in silence. They resembled shogi players agonizing over their first moves, though ultimately, it was only Aoko that had considered the scene that carefully. She decided to put her irritation aside for the time being. With no reason to feel revulsion for him in the first place, she sighed deeply and faced Ojiro.
まあいいわ。山城先生がヒルアンドンなのは今に始まったことじゃないし。それで、あなた名前は？
Her tone was nothing if not reproachful, though he had done nothing to offend her. But the boy failed to pick up on it. Incapable of such venom himself,
ああ、静木宗十郎かな。
he replied.
君は青崎さんだったね。
For whatever reason, he came across as happy in his response.
さんはいいわ。柄じゃないから。こっちは静木くんでいい？
いいって何が？
だから呼び方。くんづけでいいかって聞いてるの。何よ、おかしなこと言った？私。
いや、すごく。
The boy replied immediately as it was a natural response, but quickly second-guessed himself.
いや、いいんだ。ごく一般的なんだろう。静木くんで頼む。君は青崎でいいんだよな。
よろしく。
She followed her blunt reply with a swift turn away from him. While she was heartily thrilled at the prospect of the task at hand, it had been entrusted to her, and was her personal policy to see it through the end.
悪いけど、優しくしてあげる気はないから。時間も惜しいし、手早く行くわよ。
それは助かる。やっぱり時間は大切だ。
Aoko's blunt rancor was lost on him once again. Humans tend to be overly conscious about being ignored, whatever form that takes. But despite being peeved at landing none of her attacks, Aoko did her best to act professional and directed her guest into the hallway. There was no sunlight in the hallway, nor any sign of life. This was more like a prison than the cave that was the meeting room. As it dawned on Aoko that the hallway matched her mood, she sighed once again.
まず聞いておくけど、山城先生から聞いたことは理解してる？
ああ、学校の仕組みについては分かった。この建物全部に同い年の人間がいるなんてちょっと想像できないけど。
そう、よかったわね。
Aoko rubbed her forehead. This Sojiro kid had no idea what he was in for. Apparently, all he heard about school was that it was a place where a lot of people met to study. High school teachers imparted to students their knowledge in various fields of study, while fostering discipline and creativity. Just by reading that sentence, I know for a fact this isn't talking about American high schools. But never did Aoko imagine that she would have to explain the concept of school itself to someone. Yes, fundamentals were important, but this was absurd. She had serious doubts whether he could even handle classes, but Mr. Yamashiro insisted that things would work out somehow. Sojiro had managed to pass a transfer exam, after all. Barely.
ま、私には関係ないけど。
Aoko grumbled mentally as she walked down the hallway. She consoled herself with the fact that today would be the only day she'd spend with this boy out of time. Or at least, she tried to keep it that way.
Aozaki.
He asked, calmly trying to get her attention.
何？
こっちも一つ聞いていいかな。
だから何？
俺の気のせいだと思うんだが、君はまるで何かを睨んでいるように見える。やはり今朝は悪いものでも。
His gaze revealed earnest concern, as if asking her if she'd remember to eat breakfast. That doesn't get old! Immediately, pissed off face. It was like another hammer to her head. What is she doing? It was true that Aoko had been glaring at Sojiro the entire time. Glaring red-hot daggers, in fact. Not just at him, but the universe. Even on her best days, her roommate used to remark,
青子の視線は普通の人には厳しいわ。
Alice!
もう少し多くのことに寛大になるべきね。
She'd been warned that her emotions were so naked on her face that people treated her like a powder keg. How naive could the boy be that he could not pick up on this?
私をバカにしてるってわけじゃなさそうよね、この場合。
Even she found her own attempt to reassure herself unconvincing. It began to dawn on Aoko far too late that compared to her, this laid-back transfer student might as well have been from another planet.
いいわ。言葉にしないとわからないようだから言うけど、あなたの気のせいじゃなくて、私は視線で遠回しに感情を表現してたの。いちいち声に出すのも会話にするのも面倒だから。
In response to her words, the Martian clapped. The Martian clapped his hands together.
なるほど。どうしてそうしたいのかはわからないが、確かにそっちの方が手っ取り早い意思表現だ。
Sojiro accepted her reasoning without argument, though he still had no idea what kinds of emotions she was trying to express. It was as if he could hear the words but didn't grasp the meaning. Ideas that should have connected were instead separated into blocks.
確かにずれてるわ、こいつ。
Mr. Yamashiro's words made sense to her now. What was odd about this boy went way beyond naivety. A stranger in a strange land he may be, but it was only civilized to forgive him some jet-lagged induced confusion.
じゃ、とりあえずあなたの教室に行くから。
Hold up, check my phone real quick. This is crazy. He hates it when we say it, but he even put the 2-meter defeater on this man's stick. I swear to God. She had regained her composure. Sojiro raised his hand and stopped in his tracks.
あと一つ。
Aoko waited for Sojiro to continue. The boy was patient to a fault. She rubbed her forehead with her hand again, nursing a vague feeling of uneasiness.
これもちょっとした疑問なんだが、なんで君は怒ってるんだ？怒るのが商売とか、そういう家柄の人なのか？
One, never ask a girl why she's angry. That's like poking the bear. A long silence. Though she knew it wouldn't change the situation, she remembered her regret at answering the phone that morning. He meant no harm. She repeated this though she repeated this thought like a mantra in an attempt to keep her impulses in check.
別にあなたのせいじゃないから気にする必要はないわ。
Is there like an auto button on this thing?
ただ、この一瞬とお昼まで眠っていた場合を計りにかけたら、あまりに利益の違いがあって頭を抱えただけよ。
With that vague answer, she started to walk again, and turned her gaze away from this rude stranger named Sojiro Shizuki. Oh good, I don't have to press the controller. Never mind, I'm actually going to take it off. While that constitutes normal is certainly up for debate, most would undoubtedly refer to him as so. He was a simple and nice boy with nondescript features. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would have been vanilla. Even from yesterday, that is still such a weird line. If he were an ice cream flavor, he would be vanilla. That sounds so weird. Oh well. And Sojiro found Aoko to be very businesslike and full of life. There was a certain purpose to her movements, as they began and ended in an orderly fashion. The way her finger raised when she pointed at things. The way she made her way across the hallways and classrooms. The way she would occasionally glance back at him to make sure he was keeping pace. Each and every movement was so impressive that he couldn't take his eyes off her. Aoko showed him to his homeroom, Class C of the 11th grade. The room certainly displayed more of a human touch than the previous meeting room, but Sojiro was none the wiser as to its function. Aoko gave a brief explanation before they visited individual subject classrooms, as well as the gym, cafeteria, locker room, and school infirmary. Sojiro asked so many questions that much time passed before they reached the AV room on the second floor.
まずいな。
Sojiro stopped, looking genuinely concerned.
あと20分経つと1時だ。
え？嘘でしょ？うちの校舎そんな広くないわよ。
The tour had begun around 10, which meant that 3 hours had passed. A tour of a school shouldn't take anywhere near this long.
そうだったわね。行く先々で根掘り葉掘り聞かれちゃ、そりゃ何時間でも経つわ。日が暮れていないのが不思議なくらいね。
Aoko glared at Sojiro. She was being sarcastic, of course, knowing full well he would never pick up on it. And my controller died. Nice. Thank God I'm on Bluetooth. Now I was going to grab the spare controller. And I don't like that controller. Wait a second, where the hell is it? Oh, god damn it. Great. I gotta play peekaboo in my room. Oh, no. Never mind. There it is. There we go. Okay, battery full. Is he? To her surprise, he looked down apologetically, unable to hide his dejection.
なんだこいつ。ちゃんとしてるっちゃ。
The guy before her now was nothing like earlier. In contrast to seeing his once impenetrable veneer when they first met, she found herself feeling sympathetic. Momentarily, at least, until her irritation returned in full force.
で、何がまずいの？覚えることが多すぎてパンクしたなんて言わないでね。
いや、それもあるけど、学校のことは別にして一時になるとまずいんだ。
Sojiro's gaze wandered as if worried about something. If he was worried about the weather, he would have a hard time seeing it as there were no windows in this hallway.
へえ、時間を気にするってことは用事があるのね。そう。人の予定を引っかき回しておいて、自分だけ好きなようにやろうって言うんだ。なんだ、顔に似合わずいい人ね、君。
いや、褒めても何も出ないぞ。
誰も褒めちゃいないわよ。
I'm never gonna get tired of these over-the-top looks in these visual novels. Careful, don't let her bite you. She yelled at him, unable to hold back her fury.
で
で、
それで一体何の用なの？
Sojiro's face lit up as he finally understood what she was asking him.
そこは秘密にしておきたい。
He said with a perfectly straight face.
慣れ始めたつもりだったけど、こいつのこういったテンポには失神しそうになるわ。
Her frustration was natural. Still, she did everything she could to stifle her feelings and fake a smile.
しずきくん？
Oh no. She took a step forward.
秘密だってば。
Feeling the mood change drastically, Sojiro took a step back. And another. And another. No matter how many steps he took back, she kept edging toward him. She was smiling, but he thought he could see the blood boiling beneath her skin.
これ、最後の質問にしとくわね。
To everybody in the stream, and everybody watching on YouTube, if a girl looks at you like this,
あなた、私をからかって楽しい？
and asks you calmly, or in such a sweet, sickly voice, with that look, say your prayers, write your testament, and run. Just run. Because that girl's out for blood. This is like that look on any person. Just is a horror movie in on itself. And my phone's going nuts. He had no intention of mocking her, though at this point he doubted presenting any evidence to prove this would do much to erase that forced smile on her face.
分かった。説明する。
His arms raised in surrender. She halted her advance and freed her face from that unseemly smile.
実は1時からアルバイトがあるんだ。でもここはそういうの禁止なんだろ？
そうだけど、あ、禁止されてるから秘密にしようと思ったの？バカね。それなら許可さえ下りていれば問題ないわよ。
Dweeb.
知ってる。試験の時に許可をもらってる。
へえ。
Aoko's face lit up as she realized he might not be the piece of work she thought him to be. Yet.
しかし、許可は一つしかもらえなかった。
一つって、あなた掛け持ちでバイトしてるの？
これでも2件減らしたんだ。生活費だけで大変なのに、学費まで稼がなくちゃいけない。なのに働き先は一つだけというのはあんまりだと思わないか？
いや、あんまりなのはあなたの方だと思うけど。
Though still irritated, her opinion of him changed a little. She was impressed that he was able to take care of his tuition and living expenses all on his own. She could also empathize with having no time to oneself. Her anger began to subside. The words part-time job were about the last thing she ever expected to hear out of this country boy's mouth.
そういうことなら仕方ないわね。いいわ、行きなさいよ。事情は分かったから。
青崎はいいのか？
She had no idea what his question meant, but she at least understood he was trying to be considerate, which also took her by surprise. She figured he'd be just as dense about people's feelings as he was about everything else.
別に、私もこのまま帰るから。
First, though, she thought it best that they both stop by the faculty room. Mr. Yamashiro had mentioned that the transfer procedures had already been completed, so all that remained was for him to sign off on her duties.
先生、案内終わりました。
それはお疲れ様。しずきくんもお疲れ様。それで校舎を回った感想はどうかな？
ありがとうございます。なんというか、とても学校ですね。
そうかそうか。うん、明日から頑張りなさい。
She had no interest whatsoever in this pointless wrap-up meeting.
山城先生のことは気にしないでいいわ。教え子に厄介なことを押し付けてふんぞり返っているぐらい職員室が好きなんだから、何時間でも待ってるでしょ。いえ、待ってるべきじゃない？
そうか。青崎がいいんならいいんだな。
There it was again. Whatever Sojiro was getting at, Aoko had no idea.
それじゃあ行くよ。今日はありがとう。
今日だけよ、今日だけ。
She shooed him away with her hand. His face bent into a broad smile, as if he found the gesture endearing. It was a softer expression than she had grown accustomed to seeing out of him. It was the kind of smile that would make anyone smile back. Well, most people at least. Aoko Aozaki didn't betray the slightest hint of a smile.
それじゃあまた。
は？
And with that friendly farewell, Sojiro walked toward the end of the hallway. Or so she thought before he turned into the next class over. Sojiro headed straight for one of the classroom's window, whereupon he opened it with ease. The chilly November air filled the room as the soft sounds of the rain doubled in volume. In that instant, she realized his intention of opening the window. She really wished she hadn't.
いや、待て待て待て
He already had one leg out the window when she dashed to stop him.
何するつもりよ、あんたは。
何ってアルバイトに行くんだけど。
その窓は人が出入りするところじゃないの。だいたいここ何階だと思ってるの？
She saw the light of understanding dawn in his eyes.
死ぬところだった。2階から降りたら危なすぎる。
Who would put an exit? Dude, you're on like what, the second floor? 2C? It's a window! Not an opening glass door that you see in like for a patio or something. Like where do you think you are? Farmland?
危ないのはあんたの頭。
I mean, lack of common sense. Not the brain. He has a brain. Her insult went right over his head.
あのね、こっちじゃ窓から人は出入りしないの。さっき言っとくべきだった。
知ってるよ。時間がないんで慌ててたんだ。ありがとう。これからは気をつける。
How about you stay away from windows? Oof. He pulled his leg back inside and closed the window. His school uniform was soaking wet from the rain.
いいけど、私は別に。あなたがどこから外に出ようが関係ないもの。ただ、できれば私の前ではやらないでほしいだけよ。それより、あなた、本当に明日から学校に来るの？
来るよ。不安だけど案内してもらったし。
He bid her farewell before running away down the hallway. She hoped he would walk down the stairs and leave through the school entrance like a normal person.
はあ、大丈夫なのか？あんなんで。
The image of him disappearing into the distance popped into her head, in spite of her ire. She had no intention of spending any more time with him, and yet she felt strangely anxious. She couldn't tell if the feeling was fueled by concern or irritation. Why had she even gotten angry with this insignificant transfer student in his first place? A strange day with a strange transfer student resulting in strange emotions. You just need one more strange and you summon Doctor Strange at that friggin' point. Her head tilted as she reflected on what should have been a more enjoyable day than the irritating experience she just had.
ま、いっか。どうせこれっきりなんだし。
The sound of the rain echoed quietly all around her. The gray sky seemed frozen in time. It was impossible to discern whether it was morning or evening. Mr. Yamashiro and Naoko were likely the only ones left at school. The unlit classroom looked overly gloomy and ominous as Naoko stood in it alone. She pulled up her left sleeve. Her dainty, unremarkable watch showed that it was almost 1 o'clock.
時間合ってる。
She looked out the window at the grounds below. She saw a boy in uniform running through the rain without an umbrella, a sight she must have seen before, but for whatever reason affected her far more than she wished. Hmm. 50 minutes for one chapter, and there's 2 more. Damn, just for chapter 1, just 1 part. Damn. Oh well. I'm not tired or tired. Aoko did not stop by the faculty room before heading home. While Mr. Yamashiro's offer to drive her home was tempting, she decided it would ultimately be far more satisfying to ruin his day just as he had hers. She walked as quietly as she could toward the entrance and opened her bright red umbrella. As she had predicted that morning, the rain was waning in the afternoon. At this rate, it would probably cease completely in an hour or so. The distant sunshine would likely have reached her by the time she arrived home.
ま、それも悪くないか。
She shrugged her shoulders in resignation. She neither liked nor disliked rain, but she found herself enjoying her walk home with her red umbrella in hand. The teachers at Misaki High School weren't fond of bright colors, so Aoko's red umbrella was an unusual sight. A ghost story about how the umbrella was once pure white had been making the rounds, but it featured Aoko instead of a ghost. It was with that umbrella that she made her way toward Misaki Station. The private Misaki High School got its name from the town of the same name. The area was once a sprawl of farmland and woodland, but rapid growth over the last 10 years had led to unprecedented modernization. There were some who fought to preserve Misaki's natural treasures.
残すことには賛成ですが、それでは残すだけになってしまうでしょう。
With those words, the mayor snuffed out the voices of the minority and ushered in a long-term plan for the new urban development. More than enough funds for the urban development were collected, and the unassuming town of Misaki became the largest municipality of Misaki City in merely 10 years. Even though it lacked the modernity of neighboring Yashirogi, or the elegance of Misaki Hills.
それも当然よね。どういじくっても、もともとが山中の宿場町だし、山ごと切り崩すって言うんなら別だけど。
Urbanization had been contained to the lowlands around the station, with most of the hills and mountains still standing as they did 10 years prior. The exhaustion of funds succeeded in protecting the old Misaki where the citizens could not. It became a truly odd suburban town, welcoming an increasingly urban population with its vestiges of an old country charm. Misaki High School was a private school established long before the town's current state. The original campus, built 50 years ago, was located high up in the mountains, making its current location its second incarnation. The path to the old grounds was remote, steep, and also well trodden by animals. For these reasons, among others, Misaki High School had been shuttered until almost 20 years ago, when it received a donation from a department store chain that allowed for the construction of a new campus in the city. And thus, Misaki High School reopened its doors, the old woodland campus forgotten. In fact, most of the students attending Misaki High School were not from Misaki at all. The hardy rustic people of this country town preferred prefectural schools to private ones. Truth be told, Aoko herself was one of them. All she had wanted after junior high was to move to Tokyo, but she hoped to spend her days enjoying live music on her way to entering a public university. But her hopes were dashed with her sister's departure, so here she was, walking alone in town with only a red umbrella to keep her company on what should have been a day off.
思い返してみると、私の人生ってなんか災難続きっぽい。
Her frustration evaporated into the cold December air. Wait, hold up. Earlier it said November, now it's December. Well, make up your mind. What's the weather? What's the month?
でもま、いっか。退屈だけはしないわけだし。
With those words, her mood brightened a bit as she left the school in her wake. The busier part of town met her at the bottom of the gently sloping road. Misaki's trains Tren. Jesus, I'm saying Tren. Misaki's train station was brand new. Once looking no prettier than an abandoned factory, it had been renovated into a multi-purpose structure with huge department stores on its east and west sides. When the department stores first opened, Aoko and her friends had been impressed with their modern feel, but in time, the stores, too, became dated. She had no shopping to do today, so she passed them by. What she really wanted to do was rest at a cafe, but she fought the urge, knowing her roommate would never let her hear the end of it if she frittered away her money. She looked back and blinked. For just a moment, she could have sworn that she had seen someone suspicious in a red dress out of the corner of her eye. It must have been her imagination. The sixth sense chill she was experiencing down her spine was a familiar one at this point. She continued her walk home, brushing off the event as if it had never happened. In time, the chill faded and all that was left was the sounds of the town. She sighed heavily. Had she imagined it? Even if it had been in her head, she was far from comfortable with the feeling that still lingered.
夏場の方ってもう少しこう
She grumbled under her breath.
波乱万丈、商売繁盛、諸行無常と。そうそう、忙しさに愚痴を言っても始まらないわ。
Unfortunately, summer and bugs go hand in hand. She could see how bugs could be drawn to all the sweet fruit. Rank with grease and heat, the kitchen was closed for the time being. The lunch rush had come and gone, but one last battle remained. Dinner time. Only after the evening chaos could the kitchen crew remove their white armor and call it a day. In the midst of the war zone was a lone newcomer.
これ着るんですか?
His voice was uneasy, betraying how new he was.
気持ちはわかる。俺もどうかと思うけど、店長の言うことだから、もう笑顔で乗り越えてくれ。これも商店街の明日のためなんだとよ。本気で申し訳ないんだが、雨も止んだし、なんとか行ってきてくれないか？無事帰ってきたら晩飯おごってやっから。
Free food? Take that offer. His bright orange co-worker clasped his hands together as if to beg for forgiveness as he saddled him with this unreasonable task. "10 years ago, Misaki City was a town of farm and woodland. But everything had changed. The front of the station was now lined with The front of the station was now lined with tall multi-story buildings, and the residential areas were similarly full of apartment complexes. The once rustic scenery around the station had long become a thing of the past. Shiroinuzuka was the only place in the city that still contained vestiges of the old town, a pocket of the past inside an urban jungle. The road extended up a conspicuously high hill to an old residential district far from the hustle and bustle of the train station. Long ago, it had been considered unwise to build on high ground, so nobody lived above a certain elevation. Shiroinuzuka, sitting as it did atop a hill in the middle of town, was no exception to that convention and had no residences to speak of. The asphalt continued for some time, eventually giving way to a mountain road that was swallowed into the cover of trees. A lone vending machine stood to mark the boundary between town and beyond. Even the children knew that there was nothing beyond the new playground and development that so enthralled them. Well, that was not entirely true. There was nothing besides the haunted house. Aoko Aozaki traversed the long slope. Below her, she could see the whole of Misaki. The symmetrical town looked like a miniature set from this height. It would look like a painting if there had been a sea next to it, but unfortunately, Misaki City was very much landlocked. While it was overcast at the moment, the scene was quite breathtaking on clear evenings. The view was the one thing that made the arduous climb worthwhile, and today, she had been denied even that. What's up, man? How you doing? What the heck is that supposed to be? Pretty cool, though.
ああ、雨の日は自転車も使えないし、1日に2回ぐらいバスでも通ってくれないもんかな、ほんと。
So far, my stream's going well. Sitting at 1 hour, I'm praying to God it doesn't die again. I don't want to go back on this. I love it, but it's like, Jesus. Aoko had been using this road to get to school for almost 2 years now, but the journey had never gotten easier.
あれ、鍵閉まったまま？
Yes, it's a gate. You lock it.
アリス、まだ帰ってきてないんだ。
With a weary shrug, she put her hand on the rusty iron fence. Quietly, the heavy gate swung open as if to welcome her home. There sits atop that hill a haunted house. That is how the story much shared around town used to begin. But fresh rumors about the house had sprung to life almost as fast as the town's modernization. Despite being dilapidated and abandoned for many years, lights can be seen inside the house at night. An angry murder of crows often gathers atop the hill before mysteriously vanishing. Children get lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Late at night, a shrieking sound can be heard all the way to town. This particular piece of slander was the one Aoko wished to discredit the most. The final rumor was of an eye-catching luxury car that sometimes made its way up and down the hill. The rumors spread and grew by the day. And while they grew, the house that everyone thought had rotted away was restored over the recent years. Deep in a wood on top of a hill no one dared to approach. Like a ruin, shrouded from view even on the brightest of days, stood a relic out of time, a building from a fairy tale. The house was the Kuonji, that is, I can barely pronounce it, Kuonji Mansion. Everyone in town knew about the witch's house on the hill. The unabashedly haunted house where Aoko Aozaki resided for reasons unknown. Needless to say, it was not really haunted. The Kuonji family was a grand Western-style mansion with a long and storied history, stretching all the way back to England. It was too small to be a dormitory, yet too big to be called a house. The main building contained as many as 3 normal houses worth of rooms and was surrounded by a large, all-encompassing courtyard. The perimeter of the grounds was surrounded by a high, iron fence covered in thorny vines. There was also an annex to the main building. Given such extravagance, it was no wonder that it inspired rumors. To the town residents, the mere existence of such a lavish and out-of-place mansion on top of the hill was a siege for suspicion. Rumors, lies, and slander were the prices to be paid for fame. With only 2 lodgers, it was hard to disagree with the perception that vampires must be living here.
ま、私はともかく、アリスはそういうのやりかねないし。
She put her hand on the front door. It was a grand double door that would have paired well with a brass lock, and yet it was secured with little more than a simple keyhole. Pushing it open with one hand, she entered the supposedly haunted house. And by the way, if vampires were not enough to scare you, ghosts were known to appear on certain nights. Okay. Last one before we actually catch up. I swear to God, this piano. Much like the weather outside, the foyer was overcast with shades of gray. Perhaps by deliberate design, the architect had chosen not to include any lights in the entrance area. The ceiling was 2 floors high. The only light in the room came from the skylight. It was particularly gloomy on rainy days. On moonless nights, it was like the world itself ceased to be. Aoko decided the drawing room to the east would be a good place to rest, but knowing that she would not be able to relax until she changed clothes, she started up the stairs. The stairs curled up the wall to the 2nd floor hall. There was a 3rd floor attic as well, accessible from the far end of the hall. She had never set foot in there in the 2 years she had lived here, though. The Koonji mansion was more or less divided into wings, east and west. Aoko had been given the entire east wing, but 2 rooms were more than enough as far as she was concerned. She had no desire to open a door that would trap you in a storybook world, or lead to an attic that had only been used for storage these last 5 years. Aoko's room was at the end of the east wing's long corridor. She had elected for a smaller room for no other reason other than that she thought it would be easier to clean. It was furnished with a large bed, her beloved mahogany desk, a wardrobe and chest for her clothes, and 2 9-shelf bookcases. That is all she brought with her from home. Her entire life of 16 years reduced to this. She borrowed the next room down for her own purposes. She borrowed the next room down for her own purposes.
そうだ、アリスにもらった見張りと壊れてないかチェックしないと。
She needed to see if the project she had been working on all night had borne fruit. The study next door served as proof of the life she had been living for the last year, and how different that life was from the one she had lived before. It was not a room for the person she had been. It was a room for the person she would eventually become. A place of solitude that only she could enter. Or so she thought.
うわ、壊れてるどころか跡形もなく消え去ってる。やっぱ自己流アレンジはまだ早かったか。いいわよ、笑いなさいよ、コマドリ。
The nosy neighbor that had intruded upon her sanctuary flew away. While not exceptionally talented, Aoko did not lack for effort and was not afraid to fail. One could have almost mistaken her approach from optimism. She changed out of her uniform and returned to the 1st floor. Oh, nice jeans. Down the stairs, she opened the door to the east wing in the corridor as dark as a cellar. The absence of windows meant it was pitch black without the lights on, so she flicked the switch and entered a nearby doorway.
It
had been her idea to update the drawing room. The walls were decorated with extravagant patterns, and around the room were large, majestic sofas and the luxurious Persian rug. Amidst it all was a 30-inch television that seemed completely out of place. It stood looking over the other furniture like the emperor with no clothes. The mansion's owner would have rather done without it, but to a commoner like Aoko, it was an essential commodity. They had fought over its presence at first, but eventually came to an agreement and now mutually enjoyed its modern comfort. Looking at old VHS.
なんだ、人のことは言えないか。うちも案外時代錯誤な家だった。
Now in a somewhat pleasant mood, she decided to brew some tea. She boiled some water in the kitchen, prepared a teapot, and made herself some black tea. With a flop, she sank into the sofa. She took a sip of her tea, then another. That's like good wallpaper material right there. Lulled by the ticking of the clock, she took a third sip as she pondered how to spend her afternoon. The sofa almost seemed to be inviting her, and she sunk even further into its comforting embrace. Aoko blearily opened her eyes as she lifted her body up from the cushions. This was no dream or delusion. At some point, a girl had sat down across from her. Not the least bit surprised, she reached for her teacup. But the tea within had gone completely cold.
寝てた。
She asked a question to the girl on the other side of the table.
ええ。
The girl answered without lifting her gaze. Da-da-da-da. When silent, she could have been mistaken for a beautiful doll. The girl sitting on the opposite sofa was reading an old book. She had delicate limbs and pale white skin. Not a hint of humanity emanated from her melancholic aura. She had darker hair than Aoko, and her icy eyes were focused on the pages in front of her. Her clothes resembled that of a nun, but were actually her school uniform. In Aoko's humble opinion, the gloominess suited her. She evoked something like out of a painting. There was something unreal about her, as if she were frozen in time. The white of her neck was so lovely that even Aoko found herself enchanted by it. The girl was one of the haunted house's 2 residents. Her name was Alice Kuronji, and she was the same age as Aoko.
私、どれくらい寝てた？
1時間と少し。ここで眠ると風邪ひくわよ。
Alice answered indifferently. Not that it bothered Aoko, who was now used to it. She looked at the clock on the wall and saw that it was already 7. She had been asleep for 2 hours. The day had been a rough one for her, and she had slept little the night before, so it was no surprise that she had dozed off for as long as she had.
起こしてくれてもよかったのに。せっかくの紅茶が冷めちゃったじゃない。
私が来た時はもう冷めてたわ。
でしょうね。言ってみただけよ。
Aoko drank down the rest of the cold tea in one gulp. In the poorly heated Kuronji mansion, that was more than enough to clear her head and wake up.
こうなると フォートナム&メイソンも何もないわね。おかえり、アリス。玉の贅沢もあんた抜きじゃ閉まらないってことかしら。今日は薬日か天中殺か。ちょっと早いけどお参りってのも十分ありかもね。
Aoko shrugged her shoulders as if resigning herself to her fate.
それで何があったの？
After 2 years together, they knew each other After 2 years together, they knew each other quite well. Aoko had one way of asking questions, and Alice had another. Alice asked without raising her head, and Aoko gave her the details.
まず謝らなくちゃいけない。昨日徹夜で完成させた例のあれ、意味がなくなっちゃったのよ。ちょっと目を離した隙に沸騰しすぎて壊れちゃったみたい。そうならないよう循環のコードを 2,3 本外したり縫合したりしたんだけど。
Aoko tried to laugh it off as if it were someone else's problem.
どういうこと？
今朝休養が入って学校に呼び出し受けたの。そこで転入生の世話を押し付けられて一日が無残にも消費されちゃって、帰ってきたら跡形もなく消えてました。怒る？アリス。
別に青子の器物破損にいちいち怒っていたら一生分の口論をすることになるでしょ。代用品はあるからまた一から始めればいいわ。それより怒ってるのはあなたの方じゃないの？
Alice was very much on point today. It was true that, despite outward appearances, Aoko was seething with frustration. That aside,
この転入生っていうのがひどくずれててね。すごい山奥で暮らしてたらしくて、こっちの常識が通じないんだから。三問以下って言葉があるけど、あれって本当のことなのね、アリス。
Alice raised her head in response to hearing her name, but Aoko kept going on before she could get a word in edgewise. Aoko, after all, expected no sympathy in the first place.
初対面から尺に触るやつだったけど、教室を案内した時なんか失神しそうになったわ。そいつ教室で教師と1対1で授業を受けるもんだと思ってたらしいの。それはそれでまだ流せる。許容範囲よ、あの程度の冗談は。で、私が簡潔かつ丁寧に教室の何たるかを教えた後で、そいつなんて言ったと思う？それで青崎、他の教室は何に使うんだ？ですって。教室に他も何もないでしょ？なんていうか、そいつは少しでも説明を怠るとそのままで納得しちゃうのよ。何も疑問に思わないというか、想像力が欠如してるっていうか、想像することに慣れてないっていうか。まあ一度言ったことはちゃんと分かってるっぽいからバカってわけじゃないんだけど。
あなたが人を批評するのは珍しいわね。そういうダメな人気にするたちだったの？
みじんたりとも気にしないわよ。けど明日からどんな間違いをしでかすのかちょっと心配なだけ。
what she was really worried about was having to clean up that mess if and when it happened. That had to be it. If not, it would mean she had no real idea why she could not get him out of her head.
とにかく変なやつなの。案外アリスと気が合うかも。
三問異界はいい言葉ね。
But from her eyes, it was clear that the question of whether they would get along was irrelevant, given that they would never meet in the first place. Aoko gave a non-committal response.
ところでアリス、さっきから何読んでるの？
霊的進化論の二次創作。 スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
Spiritual evolution based on the spiritual diary. More research probably? Hey Kappa, if you still here, this looks like a good thing to research on. Spiritual evolution.
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今さら読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。惜しい人を亡くしたわ。
Aoko seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に頼りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Aoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど。
Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body, buried in the sofa, remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out of the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Aozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
ならいいけど。
The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, chasing one at the expense of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
She had only known for sure for the last year and a half, but she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
オッケー、アリス。来週中に決着をつけよう。それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Aoko could not help but shake her head, feeling as she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now, they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Aoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Alice decided to tune into a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak, but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She had always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes, her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Aoko that the ah sound her cute little roommate made just now was different from the wa she blurted in times past.
Nani?
Aoko turned down the volume on the TV. Her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat.
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she should bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If he could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly. Excuse me.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Aoko nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない本当に意味のないことよ。けどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
For a second, Aoko thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone, really. But she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Aoko, this story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Aoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
いいの。私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことってそんなに簡単かしらね。
難易度以前にそれをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね、私は。
Hold up. Earlier, Sojiro asked why he was in this and he had to go. It's him. Damn. That's sad. Dude's dressed up as a giant cat delivering meals. Alice nodded tentatively at her words.
まあ、世の中いろいろあるから。私たちみたいなのもいれば、下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人といるよ。私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに。で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Aoko loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. Yeah, that is a cute expression right there. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants of Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of this gruntomit.
時間は8時前。 ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
Bro, I wanna try soba so bad. The Hungry Student Council president took out their many menus and excitedly looked for anything that stood out. Menus? I forgot the 80s was so weird. You didn't have DoorDash, so all you had to do was have the menu at your house and then order on the phone. Alice casually responded without sparing so much as a glance.
悪いけど、私夕飯済んでるの。
With those words, Aoko froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. The arrow. Incidentally, to counteract orders of the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared the minimum number of orders will be 3 starting next year. Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction. Damn, they're screwed for... Quick, kidnap someone so you have 3 people.
この裏切り者。だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ。
Unfortunately for Aoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was unknown how serious Aoko was being, but she was visibly angry. Yeah, no shit. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話？
Damn. Aoko had kicked the hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. Hey, if you got it from a Lawson, then you probably got an egg sandwich. Those shit bangers. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book as she was reading and stood up, as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned towards Aoko.
聞きたい。
まあ、なんとなく。
Aoko nodded timidly. Cowed? Cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
She got free food! And with that brief response, she left the room. There we go, and we have caught up to where I ended last night's stream, but Twitch did not record. Put that back. So I am confused because this is 1.5. I don't know if I'm supposed to read this yet. Or if I just put continue. I don't know if it's going to take me straight to 1.5 or chapter 2. So, let's see. I want to see where it takes me. One second. I will be right back. I have returned. Just had to deal with something. My door's not closed. There we go. Okay. Now let's continue on to the next episode. If it's chapter 2, good. If it's chapter 1.5... Actually, no. If it's chapter 2 and not 1.5, I'll just get out and go to 1.5 and go from there. Next episode. Oh, so it is chapter 2. Okay, never mind. How do I get out of this?
都会は魔界だ。
Ah, here we go. Oh, it's square? That's so weird. You know what? I'll put it right here. Okay then. 1.5 it is. 7 Days of Spinning, Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. That looks interesting. What is that? What are those, cows? Let's read it. Oh, okay. Morning in the city moved incredibly fast. It made one wonder if it was even a morning at all, with people so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Bushy? Wait, what? The unfamiliar roar that awoke him reminded him of a rock slide. The identity of the monstrous sound was the engine of a motorcycle. Mr. Yoshida, his neighbor, was leaving for work. It was hard to determine when night ended and morning began here. The town's urbanization was synonymous with insomnia. He sluggishly lifted himself off the floor. He caught himself starting to survey his surroundings out of habit for deciding better of it, and made his way to the washroom. There, he poured himself a cup of water and slowly gulped it down. Having been relegated to well water until recently, he found the convenience pleasing. Pleased was definitely the word that best described how he felt. Civilization is about erasing inconveniences through optimization. The reduction of labor in our daily lives. Mr. Koga had taught him that while the essentials were easier than ever to get our hands on, life itself was growing more and more complex. So too was it his duty to adjust to his new reality. As a distant relative of Sojiro's father, Mr. Koga had taken Sojiro in, even though the boy had been little more of a stranger in his life till that point. Mr. Koga had helped him get registered at school and find an apartment to lease. Though he had insisted that Sojiro handle his residence card and register his change of address by himself. This series of procedures proved exceedingly difficult for Sojiro, but knowing that this was a part of his new city life, he did his best to complete them diligently. While they may have a reputation for being a stickler for the rules, city offices aren't all that bad. It was the first thing Sojiro learned after beginning his life in the city. 2 weeks had elapsed since he had left the countryside. As uneasy as living alone made him feel, he felt he could make it work. It was not as if the people here spoke another language, and Mr. Koga was absolutely right about how practical the rules of the city were. Sojiro continued down the hard, but surprisingly walkable path. Before work, he jogged in the park to pass the time. Even exercise like this offered lessons for Sojiro to learn. Each passing person was a new face to look at. The old man who greeted him, the young worker with his eyes to the ground, and the girl on the bench surrounded by birds. They were all unfamiliar sights to Sojiro. Unaccustomed to the city, he labored to understand its rules. Whether they were complex or simple, or completely meaningless, compared to mountain life, which only dealt with nature, city life felt one with way too many options. You could argue that such an environment was toxic for Sojiro. His life was a string of unsettling moments, but amongst it all, there were rules that he sincerely admired. For one, that the city revolved around various forms of profit and loss. The fact that one only needed money to get bare essentials to survive the city was a comforting thought to Sojiro.
Yeah, そうシンプルな話じゃねえよ。金なんてものはあくまで記号で、 本当に大事なのは別にあんだからさ。所詮は流動する肩たたき券と変わんねえっつうが、別に1万円札食ってもうまくねえっつうが。ともかく金で真心は買えねえじゃん。じゃねえよ、ざけんなよ。俺は悲しいよ。ついこの間まで4000ポッチの日当に鹿みたいに首かしげていた正直者がくだらねえ皿洗いをしながら「世の中金だよね」なんてボソッと言わないでくれっつの。
いや、貨幣制度は素晴らしいと思う。正直物々交換の限界を感じた。それより木の実、ふざけてるとそれ落とすぞ。
っておお、やべやべ、次割ったら今度こそ俺の頭が割られちまうからな。忠告サンキュー。それで相談事？何？もしかして金？
そうなんだ。とりあえずお金は大事で、たくさんあるに越したことはないって痛感した。なんでできればもうちょっと働きたい。
マジ？マシーンみたいに皿洗いをこなしながら夢のないこと言わないでほしいな。世の中金じゃねえって言ったばかりじゃんか。やっぱラブじゃんか。ところで水冷たくないですかね。冬場の皿洗いって割り合わねえことこの上ねえよ
な。そりゃ冷たいけど、これぐらいは我慢しないと。山の水は冷たいっていうより痛かったし。
氷水と同じにすんな野生じめ。しかしあれだね、呆れた順能力、いや忍耐力っつうの。レジ打ちすらできなかった新人がよ、たった4日でしみったれた飯屋の社畜になっちまうなんて、やっぱ世の中金ってことかね。資本主義ってすげえ。
The power of capitalism. The power of capitalism. Oh, I like that.
うるせえぞバカバイト。文句あんならやめちまえ。
Damn.
うちにはごくつぶしにくれてやる小遣いはねえ。
The complaints and chopsticks flew at them like a storm. This mess of a Chinese restaurant manager was a stubborn man who was willing to let minors work for him and didn't shy from violence, even if it was directed at the son of a lifelong friend. Sojiro felt that this is what Sparta must have been like.
ほら怒られた。任されたことはきちんとやらないと。
優等生。こっちは何かと反抗したい年頃だっつうの。まあいいや、話は変わるんだけどよ。しずき夜に出歩くタイプ？それかチャリンコで出張る趣味？いやまあどっちかでいいんだけど。
バイトの帰りはほとんど夜になるけど、そういう話じゃないんだよな。夜の散歩も遠出も趣味じゃないけど、それが？
いや何さ、しずき引っ越してきたばかりだって言うからよ。俺らが言うのもなんだけど、うちちょい治安が悪いっての？柄が悪いわけじゃねえんだけどな。年間10人ぐらい通り魔事件っての？そういうの起きてっから。
通り魔ってなんだ？
そっからかよ。なんだほら、カバン強盗でもないか。
That's not a slasher.
辻斬りってのが近いのか。住宅街とかまだ森が残ってる方によく出やがるんだよ、そういうおかしいのが。なんであんまり夜遅くは出歩くなよな。三崎岡の公園とか有名な怪奇スポットだから。通り魔の犯人は口裂け女だったって話知らねえか？
Freak chick with a sliced mouth? The hell? Who is this? Gender bent Jeff the Killer?
ごめん。まずその口裂け女ってのがわからない。
階段だよ。口が耳まで裂けてるってやつ。今じゃさすがに時代遅れだけどよ。なんだっけ？深夜の道にな。
コート姿の女が待ち伏せていて、私綺麗とか聞いてくるんだよ。で、綺麗って言ってもいまいちって言っても家まで追っかけられて殺されるの。女の少年はおっかねえっつうか、アメコミの怪人っぽいっつうか。
It's American comic book.
いや、それ本気で怖くないか？家まで上がってくるのか、その女の人。
窓から入ってくるらしいぜ。ガサガサとこうゴキブリみたい。ギャー
What the hell?
のクソガキが厨房でその4文字は禁止だってんだろ。殺すぞ。
Damn! Did he hit him with a frying pan? Wait, no! Go back!
女の少
いや、
窓
のクソガキが厨房でそ
I just guessed that! What the heck? The back of Kinomi's head exploded in pain with the impact of his...
殺すってバカじゃねえの。
Okay, that was weird. Why did it just continue? Did I press
い
anything?
や、
窓
Sorry for going back and forth, guys. Sojin was reminded of just how dangerous this town could be.
殺すってバカじゃねえの。普通そっちの方が禁止用語じゃねえの。ここレストランなんだしさ。いや、あんまうまくねえけど。
木の実、頭大丈夫か？
え？ああ、心配無用。俺なんだか頑丈さには定評があるから。特に頭部について。
Are you Hammerhead?
ともかく、そういうわけなんで夜の暗がりは気をつけるぞなもし。しずき、見るからにかもそうな顔してるし。
ありがとう。ところで、年間10人というのは多い方なのか？
知んねえよ。少なくはないだろうけど多い方でもないんじゃねえか。ま、うちの通り魔事件が他に比べて厄介なのはまだ犯人が見つかってないってことだからね。
He laughed cheerfully. Kenobi was trying to take the edge off of his story, but the noble intention of his last was completely lost on Sojiro. His friendly warning was equally futile. Sojiro was simply impressed that Kenobi was able to laugh it off. On the way home, nobody ahead or behind, Sojiro proceeded through the dimly lit street when suddenly he turned to face an improbable sound.
あいた。
Something stabbed him in the head and fell to the floor. He frowned. A small bird had apparently flown into the telephone pole before landing on his head. The starling cleaned itself off and flew away. The falling of the bird and his desperate escape thereafter was unlike anything he had experienced in his life up to now. Most of the townsfolk would have seen the incident as unlucky, ominous, or even sinister, but Sojiro just nodded and went about his business. You understand. What might have been a first for him was surely an everyday occurrence for these city folk. Oh, that was quick. That's another desktop background material.
たったいまー。ねえ、アリス帰ってる？教会から帰るとき商店街でお土産もらっちゃった。伊勢屋のせんべい一緒に食べない？
Her voice reverberated through the foyer dyed in the colors of the setting sun. It was after 5 in the afternoon when Naoko, still in her school uniform, cheerfully returned home. She had finished her student council duties and attended her monthly meeting with the church.
おかえりなさい。その様子なら何事もなく終わったみたいね、青子。
Whoops. The voice was coming from the second floor. In contrast with Aoko and her boundless energy, A considerably calmer girl descended from above.
難癖はつけられたけど滞りなく。うちの問題はうちの問題だから、今回も手は出さないって方向でまとまったわ。それでいいのよね、アリス。
Wait, the church? Like the holy church? The one that's really just full of mages? Talking about that church? Then again, there are more than one church. It's not just the Fuyuki church, it's the whole system.
ええ。猫の手なら借りたいけど、
Yep.
あの人たちの手は信用ならないし。いつも通り後処理だけお願いしましょう。
賛成。後ろからバッサリやられかねないしね。だいたい私もあんたも背中を気にして没頭できるからじゃないし。
私はできるけど、青子は単にまだそれほどの余裕がないだけでしょ。
Tap, tap. With the graceful sounds of her steps, Alice entered the foyer. As she did, Aoko's eyes were directed towards the skylight above.
ガラス曇ってるわね。
そのことで話があるわ。今日の課題が終わったらだけど。青子、体の調子は？疲れているなら休みを入れてもいいけど。
え？何よ気味悪いな。気遣いされることなんてないってば。いつも通りの一日だったし。そんな疲れた顔してる？私。
As school activities went, today's were a breeze. At a glance, her school life might have seemed almost the hell? Idyllic? Okay. Though the more she thought about it, some headache-inducing incidents may have stood out here and there. And with some sincere introspection, Aoko may have recognized the signs of her own mental fatigue, but doing so would have further added to her stress.
ストップ。なんで帰ってきてまであんなののことで疲れなくちゃいけないんだ、私。今日の課題って初歩のウィッシュでしょ？
Wish?
問題ないわ。すぐ始めましょう。今日はなんか勢いでうまくいきそうな気もするし。
Mesmerize basics. Wish. Aoko focused on shedding her anger and stress, and headed upstairs with gusto.
どうしたのよ？アリスの部屋でやるんじゃないの？
The formally dressed Alice nodded in slight dissatisfaction.
それで、伊勢屋のせんべいって今日の？
She looked at the freshly baked treats Aoko was holding. Oh, she want food. Understandable. In the end, their lesson took place after Alice had her cup of tea. For an apprentice like Aoko, Alice Kuonji was the kind of roommate and teacher that was hard to come by. If she insisted that Aoko rest to preserve her health, Aoko had no choice but to comply. The lesson was over after 2 hours, so the two finished the dinner they had prepared and decided on a change of venue for where they would spend their last hours of the day. The sunroom was next to the drawing room in the east wing of the residence and offered a view of the beautiful grounds. The proud Kuonji Estate's luxurious sunroom featured furnishings on par with those in the splendid drawing room. Meanwhile,
来年の夏はジャングルね。この分だと。
the grounds inside had fallen into disrepair, neglected by the owner.
ねえアリス、庭掃除専用のプロイとかいないの？
Aoko took a step into the sunroom and poured some tea.
探せばいるかもしれないけど、少し手間ね。
Playing along with her roommate's joke, Alice made to sit in her chair. Just as she caught sight of the box of chocolates on the table, her lovely eyes narrowed in a frown. Those are chocolates? I want one.
何よ、言っとくけど今日の失敗は半分アリスのせいよ。
Screw up. Wait, what?
おせんべいで気が緩んだのが敗因っていうか、そりゃウィッシュのつもりがガンドになっちゃったのは我ながら攻撃的すぎると思うけど。
Wait, wish into a Gundar? Huh. Are you guys gonna explain it? Because I actually want to know what just happened.
6個減ってるわ。
なんだ、そっちのことか。
Aoko's eyes stared intently at the box of chocolates. You could search the world and you could search the world and never find a finer selection of chocolates. The brand was Sixpence Songs, apparently.
で、鏡の話をするんだっけ？あれ、今洋館モードから岬モードになってるんでしょ？
Mirror, Misaki mode, mansion mode.
ええ、ここの管理はおざなりになるけど、岬市だけに切り替えたわ。それが昨日から曇り出している。少しずつだけど確実に包囲されてるわね。
包囲って数が増えたってこと？
捕捉していた1名はもちろん、他にもう2名ほど不審者を目撃済み。都市部に1、郊外の森に2ね。
はあ、あんたの目撃談は当てになるからな。で、うるさいのはどっち？
森の方。捕捉中だけどこっちの目に気づいているみたい。なかなか誘いに乗ってこないわ。
そっか。じゃあ今夜仕掛ける。
To go after it tonight. One simple suggestion that would change the course of her life forever. It was no overstatement to say that this was a roll of the dice that would decide whether she had the moxie to survive the experience of jumping. That was weird. Sorry about that. It was no overstatement to say that this was a roll of the dice that would decide whether she had the moxie to survive the experience of jumping out of a plane with a torn parachute. Aoko swallowed her hesitation and fear with a little tea. On the school's anniversary night, she declared that she had made up her mind, and from that time on, she would not waver. Alice welcomed her roommate's strength with the barest hint of regret. As someone who shared the same motivations as her, Alice was ultimately reassured by Aoko's resolve. Well, perhaps more pleased than reassured. All in all, it had taken the better part of a year, but finally Aoko had stepped out of Alice's shadow. The two partners now shared the same fate. Aoko was not the partner Alice had asked for, but a partner nonetheless. Strangers, worlds apart. And even if eventually they would battle each other to the death using all they had inherited, it was only right they did it on equal terms. It was, at least for now, a cause for celebration over how far Aoko had come.
せっかくだけど、今夜は私一人で十分よ。そんな余裕があるのなら、あなたはもう少し暗示の練習をするべきね。公演はあなたの担当だから、その時は働いてもらうけど。
Alice did not so much as look at Aoko as she explained her reasons. The scale of the enemy she would face that night. Her plans for Aoko. For in only 2 days from now, Aoko Aozaki will be reborn.
はいはい、わかりました。
Aoko finished her tea and stood up from her seat.
お言葉通り、暗示の練習でもやってるわ。一節目は確か、軽く弱くうまく早く、チクタクチクタク急げや急げよね。
そこは軽く弱くうまく早く急げや急げチクタクチクタクよ。
Alright, Alice is a witch. Be light and frail, nimble and fast. Tick tock, tick tock. There's no time to waste. The weight of the air, the tremble of one's breast. Light lags behind while shadows
気
pull
をつけ
ahead.
なさい。それだと逆に落ち着かなくなるわ。
Mesmerize. That's a new one.
そうだったそうだった。じゃ、一つ失礼。
Aoko grabbed a piece of chocolate and popped it into her mouth. She waited before leaving Alice alone in silence. Alice stiffened a moment before slamming the box of chocolate shut, as it would serve to scold Aoko for snacking. Oh,
おはようございます。
the fuck?
午前0時を確認しました。前回更新より24時間経過。バックアップ開始。レコード送信。
What the fuck am I looking at?
周囲の地形をスキャンします。大気成分、窒素異常なし、酸素異常なし、アルゴン異常なし、二酸化炭素異常なし、第5仮説要素、異常、異常、異常、あり。
The fifth element.
周囲の時空連続体に齟齬を確認。第一種危険物との遭遇と断定。視覚領域を主観から客観に変更。自立回路を予備電源に、計測回路を主電源に変更。カメラを赤外線計測から虚数線計測に変更。では、これより戦闘行為の記述を開始します。主よ、どうか我が身を守りたまえ。
Misaki City was a thickly wooded area. Urban development continued unabated, but Mother Nature still drew breath in its outskirts. Wise old trees had been turned to lumber. The leaves had begun to turn to mulch. Even though the birds who curiously tilted their heads had moved on, the verdure lived on, a testament to its enduring strength. Until the time came that the devouring light of civilization became powerful enough to encroach upon nature's mysterious domain. These woods were no exception. The outlying border between Misaki City and Misaki Hills had been left untouched. Though driven from their nests and dens here, wildlife continued to subsist even today. No longer able to return to the days before man, this was just like any other forest situated next to a town. What? Winter had arrived in the woods. The chill cut like a razor. The icy air so thick it could reach one's bones. Exposed cheeks stiffened, and wisps of breath formed swirls in the air before disappearing. It was 1 degree above freezing. The cold snap penetrated every nook and cranny of the woods, from the ground to the trees, even to the wildlife. Is that Alice singing? That's actually kind of cute. The forest allowed nobody entry during the day. During the winter, it willed the animals to slumber. The still evening air felt like the stagnant breath of the lingering dead. The forest consumed the moonlight, obscuring the sight of even the closest of precipices? That is weird. And hastening the untimely doom of any soul unfortunate enough to become lost within. The only noises to be heard were the whisperings of the wind and the murmurings of the stream. The immortal darkness stifled any sense of life. Not the breath of an animal, much less that of a person, was drawn in this place. However, a figure in black, not of this place, skulked within. It cast the tiniest, frailest of silhouettes, like a small boat lost in a sea of fog. Its trepidatious footsteps echoed through the woods. There, exiting the veil of trees, was the unmistakable likeness of a young girl.
To see such great unconditional away with the spoon.
来たぞ来たぞ。
いるぞいるぞ。
誰が誰が？
誰と誰が？
お腹は減ったの？
お腹は鳴ったさ。
どっちが食べる？
どっちも食べる。
Wait, what?
君は左手。
お前は右手。
歓迎しないと。
感激しないと。何しろようやく楽しいお客。
Oh, Jesus.
ついでにお腹と脛骨も。
せっかくだからよく噛まないと。
What the heck? The shadows in the trees laughed ominously. A hallucination? An illusion? Or perhaps something real? The shadows frolicked in time to the girl's pace.
さあさあさあさあ。
もっと奥へ、もっと奥へ。
ところでダイスは細工済み？
お腹の重いローデット。
端っこかじったエッジワーク。
どうでもいいけど肝心要の6の目だけは出さないように。
The girl knitted her eyebrows. She heard voices and felt the presence of things that should not be. Scary enough to frighten this particular girl? As if. Her tightly pursed lips betrayed not a hint of fear. The girl walked of her own volition. If she had truly felt fear, her legs would be frozen. Deep within the trees, she was perfectly aware of the two humanoid figures stalking her through the still night air.
見たぞ見たぞ。
来るぞ来るぞ。
もう諦めろ。
もう帰れない。
あんなに教えてあげたのに。
よそに消えないお前が悪い。
The girl halted her steps. Racket from the accompanying voices died in turn. The babbling brook suddenly sounded like a crackling fire. And then, across the shallow stream, something appeared that should not exist in the city, much less these woods.
こんばんは。話のわかる人はいる？
The girl addressed them calmly. These men with their Glasgow grins creeped toward her like two slugs.
そう。ただの墓守り。監視だけが仕事なのね。失敗したわ。これなら青子に任せればよかった。ああ。けど。
The one grinning man stood still. The other, shaken violently as if unable to contain himself any longer, turned toward the girl.
青子にはまだ荷が重いわね。そんな姿だけど あなたたちは一人前の魔術師のようだし。
Her black outfit stirred. In her right hand she held a virtuous cat, darker than the deepest night. The two Glasgow men let out a yelp of caution and incoherent fear. It was at this moment that they finally bared their intent into motion.
さようなら、お客様。きっと一瞬だろうから、お別れだけ言っておくわ。
The two shuddered at her words. They had no mouths, nor ears or brains to begin with. For creatures like these, words were redundant. All that existed was the present. For these soulless creatures, fears and hopes were nothing more than an unimaginable future. But what could be this feeling of foreboding they felt? The spine-chilling miracle that would rip them to pieces not moments from now.
さあ、ごっこ遊びをしましょう。お人形さん。
Her song sounded like a bell, echoing through the white woods. The girl's voice vanquished the frost that had gripped the trees. And then,
いやいや、ずいぶん待たされた。
さあ、赤ずきんの登場だ。
the curtains opened on Diddle Diddle, the banquet of the night. In confusion, one slit-mouthed man swooped toward the girl. In fear, the other fled into the woods behind them. The deformed humanoid darted forth, kicking up water as it rushed the girl. She already knew what this fiend was. The grinning figure had scissors for hands and a demon's heart. It was a wretch who kidnapped children, mercilessly rendering them into pieces.
トゥイードル。
お任せお任せ。
ようやく出番だ。あらよった。
The piglets bounded and rebounded like paddle balls. The stuffed animals, over 3 feet in length, jumped and weaved their way between the trees. Even with these strange creatures before him, the grinning man did not so much as blink. He raised his arms, but what emerged from his coat sleeves were not the human appendages you would expect. In their place, fiendish cleavers, more than 1.5 feet in length. These appendages, which had torn so much of their prey to pieces, sliced cleanly through the flying pig skulls. His limbs froze in place. The pigs' bodies were sliced perfectly in half. And then, dissected from head to tail, the pig's innards became as alligator jaws and clamped down the grinning man's arms. From fingertips to shoulders, they were swallowed whole. It was all it took to rob the man of control over his entire body. Another shiver of fear. These were no mere pig familiars. Immediately he realized that these were stapler monsters disguised as mere pigs.
捕まえたのはダムでした。
捕まえたのは D だってば。
ああ、でも残念。ご主人様は無口で無情で無関心。
結局どっちの手柄も同じこと。
London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down.
Impossible! Its presence murmured 3 times. Not possible, not possible, not possible? Talking pigs were one thing. Even having one's arms chopped off was in the realm of occupational hazard. In an instant, the wood was enveloped in a dense wave of magical energy. Though vexing, it was still impressive. None of these facts were particularly extraordinary. These rare familiars, their bizarre attack, was sheer innate magical energy to overwhelm others. He had experience of all these things. His employer was skilled enough to achieve all of this as well. However,
どうするどうするいつまで放置
手足一本瞬きだって贅沢だ。
お支払いは面倒でもできればポンドでお願いします。
what were they? Not vessels, not living creatures, not beings powered by magic circuits. Even though Oni's arms had been bitten, none of his body would move. It was nothing like being bound or weakened. This felt more like it had become words written in a book, fated to keep to their page. As the grinning figure's deformities indicated, he had overcome numerous curiosities and monstrosities. Illusions, enthrallment, compulsions, freezings, petrifications, putrefactions, and even petrifications, a power granted to only the pinnacle of mystic eyes. From poisons to magecraft, he had weathered a great deal, but this was something different altogether. The penalty that bound him now was based on different principles from blood, flesh, oxygen, or heat. It was an unknown restraint that followed no rules he knew. Indeed, that was terrifying to admit. It was as if he'd encountered something alien to everything in this world.
London Bridge is broken down, London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady.
Fang sank into his left and right shoulders. For the first time in this form, he felt rage seethe up inside him. The basis of all things had to be absolute. All mystics, all things bizarre obeyed some set of laws. But these pigs ignored this, along with his dignity.
さあ3日で衰弱
6日で溺死。
半年経てば惨めな骸骨
でもご無礼。
面倒だから今殺そうか
A howl. Though he had no voice, he let out an exasperated scream.
うげなんて便利自分の腕を外せる機構
おお、お前こそ三国一のものの不要。
The talkative pigs fell into the stream. The exasperated scream was the sound of the figure tearing his arms from their sockets. Armless, he rushed the girl.
役立たず。後でお仕置きが必要ね。
He may have lost his mangled arms, but not the object of his malice. A mystic guide to pierce the heart of its victim. A magic circuit designated to stop a beating heart. It was beautiful in its simplicity. At point-blank range, it was the equivalent of an unavoidable shotgun blast. But, tragically, that eye was all he had.
Build up with wood and clay, wood and clay, wood and clay. Build up with wood and clay, my fair lady.
He failed to realize that her song had changed. Oh. Jesus! Before the giant, the earth-shattering strength was akin to the act of shooing away an insect. Its green, verdant veins pulsed. Oaken bark covered its body, hardened sufficiently over centuries to repel even the chainsaw. On its forehead, inscribed in all manner of colors, was the word Emeth, though judging from its spelling description as purely decorative. The Thames Troll. It also went by the moniker Falling Down, or alternatively, the Great Bridge. Admired in different forms, it was the first of 4 miracles.
テムズ、もう一体。
The giant responded to the girl's words. With roots rent deep into the earth, it raised its left arm to the heavens without moving a step. Elsewhere in the forest, the grinning figure who had chosen to flee the battle was running through the night forest at full speed. Record and provide a detailed description of the enemy. Record and provide a detailed description of the enemy. Those were the orders assigned to him. He poured all of his energy into escaping this forest with which he had become so familiar. In case of emergency, the plan was for one to challenge the enemy while the other made a tactical retreat in order to report to their master. He dashed through the forest. Though gripped by fear, he was confident in his ability to perform the mission it was designed for. Nothing could catch him in these woods. Even the wolves could not track him. His bird-like legs stumped as they kicked the ground. Perhaps it was creator's eccentric taste that dictated their form when optimizing for running. The grinning man could reach a maximum speed of 45 miles per hour, well past the limit of any bipedal creature. After securing a distance of several miles, he turned around to confirm his safety. There was no sign of pursuit. His crescent-shaped mouth, nay, eyes slackened in relief. And then... after facing forward once more, he looked up to lock eyes with his doom.
London Bridge is broken down, broken down, broken down.
In the distance, he could hear the dark rhymes of Mother Goose. Countless vines extended from the ground. They formed into a monstrosity that conjured up images of an arched bridge, something resembling a giant arm.
London Bridge is broken down, my fair lady.
回収報告。生還は困難。解析は困難。転送は困難。状況を終了します。主よ、どうかこの身を守り。
済んだよね。お疲れ様。戻ってテムズ。次はもっと高価な場所ならいいのだけど。
The girl turned on her heel. The invaders who had set up shop in the woods were eliminated. She had no interest in whether they had been good or evil, nor how many victims he had claimed. The shackles of civic society held no sway over her. This was the way of a pure-blooded witch, the way of a Mainster. Mainster? 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 I'll just say Mainster for now.
僕たちはねえ僕たちは
この腕抜けないんだけど。
噛んだままだと僕らも動けないっていうかさ。
ひどい、飛べない豚に用はないと。
次はお役に立ちますきっと。生まれてこの方失敗続きの僕らだけど。
壊れるまでに一度くらいは褒められたいね。
The girl let out a sigh and stepped into the stream. She removed her gloves and dipped her slender fingers into the nice water.
6の目は出すなって言うけど、6の目しか出ないようになってるわよね、あなたたち。
There was no response to her melancholy tone. In place of the once boisterous pigs were 2 black dice, now sitting in the palm of her hand. As the girl was about to say something to the scattered remains around her, she realized something that made her put a hand to her mouth.
お別れは済ませていたわね。目ぐらいは聞いておくべきだったかしら。
Her slender, pale fingers traced her lips, as if reluctant to part from them. Sighing again, she calmly left the dark woods the same way she had entered. There we go. First battle. Not bad. Can't wait to see this get animated in the movie coming out later next year. One more. So far, stream has been successful, more than yesterday. Let us rewind to a moment in the recent past. The scene took place on a Saturday morning in early December. With third period over just before lunch, the only activity that remained before the scholastic day ended was homeroom. Did I say homeroom? Homeroom, not homeroom. 2 of Class C students, Sojiro Shizuki and Hosoki Kinomi, were standing outside on the balcony overlooking the schoolyard. They were stuck waiting for their homeroom teacher, Mr. Kazuki Yamashiro, and could not leave until he arrived. The rest of their classmates were chatting idly in the classroom. Class A's Tobimaru Tsukiji was killing time alongside them. The listless trio discussed their weekend plans as they leaned on the veranda's railing.
木の実はベアでアルバイトか？
ばっか、誰が日曜まで働くかったよな。明日はほら B 組の子たちと遊びに行く予定だったんだけどな。なんかうちから出られねえ。
They said they're grounded? Nah, they're probably lying. They probably found some bigger dick out there or something.
それはつまりまた振られたのか？
うわ、直撃！言いづらいことをまっすぐ言うよね、しずきくんってば。そりゃ毎日てめえのバカ面見てればひよこだって振られるって言葉を覚えるだろうよ。自滅するのは勝手だけどな。くれぐれもその字に変な遊び教えんなよ。はあ？そりゃ殿下の方じゃねえの。気ぃつけろよ、しずき。築地はマジで腹黒いからよ。こいつの頭の中はほら、あれ、ゴミ捨て場の張り紙？あんな感じだから、くっきり使えるもんと使えないもん分けてんだよ。
ああ、それは知ってる。ところで唐突に思ったんだが、飛び丸の中じゃ木の実はどういう扱いなんだ？
そうだな。粗大ゴミ回収は金でももらわねえと割り合わなくなるんじゃねえか。国が無料で回収するのはそろそろおしまいってとこ。
Damn!
はあ？何言ってんのお前。使い古しのタンスとか高く売れるじゃん。 俺みたいな開封即使用みたいな男がこれからのトレンドなわけでしょ。ほらコンビニで売ってる使い捨てカメラとか大人気だし、ようやく流行が俺の消費文明に追いついたと。
じゃあ木の実はバイトと。飛び丸は
来るからね、ちゃんと俺の時代。
俺はちょい仕様だ。親父の客が来てるんで接待しなきゃならん。街の案内をしてくれとさ。
聞けよ、人の話聞けよ。俺は妹の相手してやるだけなんだよ。隣のクソ中華飯店の手伝いなんかしねえよ。
その女は明日もバイトか？
いや、それが一日空いてる。今日はこれから遊園地でアルバイトだけど。
それって魔のきついランド？タフだね、しずき。あそこのバイトは柔道部の連中でも値を上げるって話じゃんか。
なんとまさか猫黒の荷物運びより辛い。
X-Fed. Are you kidding me? X-Fed? They couldn't get the rights to say FedEx?
いや、そこまではよく。しかし山城の野郎おっせえな。見ろ、隣の B 組すらお帰りになられてるぞ。
だな、仕方ね。面倒だが呼んでくるか。その字を遅刻させるわけにはいかねえし。
And as if by design, the moment Tobimaru Tsukiji slid up weirdly from the balcony railing, the school's PA system chime rang.
2年 C 組の静木宗十郎君、山城先生がお呼びです。至急職員室まで来てください。繰り返します。2年 C 組の。
An awkward silence fell upon the three. After a long 5 seconds, Sojo said goodbye and headed back inside.
面白いことねえな。誰か校庭にミステリーサークルとか作ってくんねえかな。
Kinomi grumbled, slouching his shoulders and succumbing to his lethargy.
他人の妄想力に期待すんなよ。刺激が欲しいならてめえでイベントを起こせ。ほら、クラス分け発表の時よろしく。青崎に突っかかればすぐだぜ。
蘇るトラウマ。やだよ、会長の大立ち回りは面白いのを通り越して恐ろしいよ。善良な一男子生徒としちゃ美少女が転校してくるだけでいいんだよ。まあ普通の子じゃつまんないからハリウッドのプロデューサーとかイギリスの歌姫とか。
どんなくくりだそりゃ。そこは火星のお姫様あたりにしとけよ。
それと2年 C 組の皆さんへ山城先生から伝言です。山城先生は訳あってホームルームを欠席しますので、各自勝手に下校しちゃってくださいね。それではでは。以上、放送室からお知らせしました。
どうよこれ。山城新車買ってからフリーダムすぎね。このままではあの真新しいセルビアに俺のギザ銃がうなりかねん。
鍵穴にガム程度にしとけ。教師の発給はマジ同情に値するからな。
The two frenemies returned to the classroom, complaining all the while. Their concern for their mutual friend summoned to the faculty office, completely out of mind.
納得いきません。生徒のアルバイトは認められています。
What's going on?
学校公認の職場であるなら 社会経験の一環として推奨すると校則にもありますが。
そうなんだけどね。彼の場合やりすぎなのが問題なわけで。
Oh no. Are they gonna make him quit all his jobs?
仮にもし認可していない労働基準法に反してそうなところで働いてたら困るでしょ。うちも彼も。
The volatile tension between the ruthless student and council president and the easygoing modern language teacher permeated through the room. Praying to be spared from the impending confrontation, the other teachers hurriedly relocated to the meeting room. By the time Mr. Yamashiro noticed this, the only other person in the room was the student council president, Aoko Aozaki.
逃げたか。ひどいな、みんな。怖いのは僕に押し付けてばっかりだもんな。
Maybe it's because you're 25 or something?
話の続きです、先生。仮に彼が指定以外のアルバイトをして下宿。なが。
そう、仮に逃げたか。
話の続きです。仮に彼が指定以外のアルバイトをしているとしたら、それは彼の要求に学校側が応えていないからではありませんか。下宿先の家賃を奨学金で賄えとは言いませんが、時間の許す限り働きたいという要望は考慮すべきです。指定外のアルバイトを疑うのなら、まず働き先は1生徒につき1件だけという規則を改めてください。
After hearing her out and realizing there was no way she would back down, Mr. Yamashiro hung his head. This was supposed to be easy. The plan was to call in the student rumored to be working multiple jobs, confirm whether the rumor was true, and if so, give him a warning and some guidance, then head to lunch with the knowledge that all was right with the world. The student council president, who was coincidentally in the faculty room at the time, had heard the entire issue and decided to call out this injustice. As far as Mr. Yamashita was concerned, she was in the right, and he was well aware of the aforementioned student situation. Personally, he would have liked to help, but among the faculty, he was just a new kid on the block. He wanted to stay on the vice principal's good side, at the very least not lose his job, as badly paid as it was.
こればかりはね、副教頭先生直々の注意なんで、僕も助けてあげられないんだよ。
それでしたら、落としどころがあればいいんですね。
ん
？The student council president removed a document from her bag. It was a document that had been brought up in the morning's faculty meeting, bringing a host of headaches with it.
青崎くん、それは。
はい。アイダ教会のボランティア参加の申告書です。
Aida Church?
今月も希望者ゼロですね。敬虔なクリスチャンである副教頭先生は、さぞお気を悪くしているかと。我が校の生徒には新人が足りんと今朝も嘆かれていたとか。
そうだけど、どうして君が今朝の職員会議の内容を知っているか聞きたいよ、本当。
Mr. Yamashiro scratched his head, but his eyes were smiling gleefully. He had figured out the student council president's objective.
魚心あれば水心ありですか。教会への奉仕活動はボランティアだけど、きちんと謝礼が出る。あれも形の上では学校側が推奨する社会見学だからね。副教頭先生は参加者が出たことに喜び、加えて
その参加希望者がすでに他のアルバイトについていた場合、学校側の認可が2つになっちゃいますね。前例にしてはいい落としどころだと思いますが。
Mr. Yamashita raised his hands in surrender. There were few students able to both raise a complaint and propose a proper solution. Perhaps it was her big sister's disposition that made this girl so simultaneously feared yet trusted.
よし、その方向で攻めてみよう。うまくいくよう祈ってくれよ。
他力本願は嫌いです。 悪巧みに乗ってくれるのならきちんと活躍してください、山城先生。
With a bow, the student council president turned to leave the faculty room.
ああ、待った待った。君も残るんだ。今からしずきくんを呼ぶから、ちゃんと面倒を見てもらわないと。
は？
The girl's cool eyes narrowed. Unable to process what she just heard, her expression turned to a scowl.
いや、参加希望者は一人より二人の方がいいだろう。青崎くんがフォローしてくれるなら僕も安心だしね。
ちょっと先生。
ああ、放送室。2年 C 組のしずき宗十郎くん、至急職員室に来てください。で、放送お願いします。
だから先
生。いやー、これで万全だ。まさか頭痛の種が同時に消え去るなんて、今日はついてる。ああ、けど青崎くん、ずいぶん親身になってくれるんだね。何？もしかしてああいうのがタイプ？あ、放送室さん、ついでに生徒会長が心からお待ちしていますと付け足して。
って山城！
What? Did she just punch the hell out of him? I wanted to see that. The next day, a pleasant Sunday, Sojiro was awake 2 hours before the time he was supposed to meet her. After getting up, he decided to go for a leisurely jog to clear his mind, but, lost among his own thoughts, his 30-minute jog turned into almost an hour. Upon realizing, he rushed home. After thoroughly racking his brain over what to wear for the occasion, he decided upon wearing a school uniform.
午前10時、三崎中央公園の東入り口で待ち合わせ。
Yesterday in the faculty room, when Aoko Ozaki had shared a time and place with him that day, she said with such pain on her face. Maybe she was fighting a headache at the time.
しかし、青崎の風邪は治っているのだろうか。
Sojiro muttered, his words of concern misguided as they were. In any case, he waited for about 5 minutes. At precisely 10 o'clock, the student council president appeared.
おはよう。いつものことだけど、時間だけはぴったりよね、あなた。ひどい顔ね。もしかして気分悪いの？
いや、体調はいいと思う。
He waved off her concern.
だがしかし、青崎は制服だった。
ええ、学校の行事だもの。当然でしょ。
A heavy weight of despondency fell upon Sojiro's shoulders. The angsting over his outfit for the previous 2 hours had been rendered meaningless just like that. The duo, clad in her school uniforms on a day off, walked by the train station. In the beginning, Aoko had made efforts to give Sojiro a thorough lay of the land, but today she only shared the bare minimum of explanations. This was partly because, surprisingly, Sojiro had become well accustomed to the town. Which restaurants were good, which shortcuts to use in a rush, and why the nearby bicycle shop was better than the department store by the station if you wanted to buy a bicycle. Things a local would know. But the other reason was because it had dawned on Aoko how the two of them conversing might look to passers-by.
話は変わるけど、具体的にどんな労働内容なのか、そろそろ聞いていいかな。
From here on, volunteering at the church meant that the school would tolerate his multiple jobs. Sojiro had quickly agreed to the tempting offer, nodding like a bobblehead. But, as was typical for him, he had failed to consider the content of the proposal.
まあ、そんなことだろうと覚悟はしてたけど。あなた、間教会は初めて？
教会なら2回目だ。 珍しい建物なんで近寄ったら中の人がタダでお菓子をくれたんだけど。
He pondered with all sincerity how exactly the church worked. Wait, what? His contemplative posture made him appear the part of the philosopher, but after all his thinking, he concluded, I guess I start taking your money in your second visit? Such was the extent of Sojiro's concerns.
普通そういうことは子供にしかしないんだけどね、あの教会は。
Aoko sighed at the lost little lamb.
で、どんな人に会ったの？神父？それともシスター？
それは綺麗な女の人だった。
じゃあユイカさんの方ね。今日会ったらお礼をって必要ないか。あんたのことだからそのあたりはきちっとしてるだろうし。仕事の話なら簡単よ。学校でやってることと変わらないから。あの教会、規模の割に人数が少ないのよ。
Aoko picked up her pace as they headed for the church. Somehow, she seemed like a general invading enemy territory. It made Sujiro furrow his brows in discomfort. Ida Church had a long history. Far from the station, it was a white-painted sanctuary nestled between the business and residential districts. As far as Aoko could remember, the church as she knew it now was the result of remodeling done 8 years prior. It was practically a cathedral for a town of this size. Incidentally, located next to it was the Misaki City General Hospital. From Aoko's perspective, it seemed awfully suspicious for the church to take up residence next to the location in the city where the most lives were lost, though the only two were aware of this opinion were her roommate, Alice Konoji, and the priest.
青崎はこの教会に縁があるのか？
私はこれっぽっちも。もう過去に戻って改ざんしたいぐらいみじんもないけど、うちの父と祖父は長い付き合い。ここの手伝いなんて忌々しいことに小学生の頃は毎日してたもんだけど。
The more Aoko spoke, the more twisted her expression became. Recalling this made her want to grab it by the proverbial collar, give the proverbial one-armed judo back throw, smash his proverbial head into the proverbial ground, and kick the proverbial living daylights out of his defensive proverbial. How many times? Such was her so-called trauma that if it were anthropomorphized, it would take more than a 5-round beating to satisfy her thirst for vengeance. It was in this moment, as he became aware of Aoko's mood, that Sojiro began to fear for his safety. Perhaps attracted by the noisy murder of quills outside the church, a woman in a nun's habit emerged from the front entrance.
失礼ですが、どちらのお客様でしょう？当教会は暴力団関係の方はご遠慮いただいておりますので、日を改める、あるいは生き方を悔い改めた後、社会的な罪を償ってから門をくぐっていただきたいのですが。
What the fuck? What type of nun comes out to church and immediately says stuff like this?
青崎青子です。シスターユイカ。
まあ、青子さんでしたか。驚きました。昼間のうちにあなたが来るのは久しぶりです。
そうですね。いつもは夜に呼ばれて神父様とだけお話をしていますから、ユイカさんとは。まあ意外ですね。1年近くまともにお話をしていません。ま、この先だって一度もないでしょうけど。
ええ、あなたも随分と立派になられたようでがっかりです。何より 今の気配は清らかな少女とは思えないほど悪辣でした。
On the surface, the two exchanged congenial greetings. Unable to read between the lines, all Sojiro could see was two good friends.
今月のボランティアは私とそこの彼です。親愛なる間協会のためですから、10時から3時まで1分の狂いもなくきっかり働かせていただきますわ。
まあ、世も末ですが歓迎しますね。神の家は万人に等しく開くもの。この際、あなたの内面は見なかったことにしておきましょう。
The nun flashed a smile that was equal parts elegant and cruel. Keeping up appearances aside, she seemed overjoyed to have able hands to put to work. The sister introduced herself as Yuka Suse and thanked Sojiro, who had volunteered of his own volition. Sojiro noticed that her eyes were always shut, but not wanting to be rude, especially in front of Aoko, he decided not to pry.
しずきさんとおっしゃるのですね。声のイメージ通り落ち着いたお名前です。
はあ、それはどうも。
The sister let slip a frown at Sojiro's ambivalent response to her compliment.
失礼。名字で呼ばれるのはお嫌いのようですね。宗十郎さんでよろしいですか？
え？いや、どっちでもいいですけど。
ではそのように。ほんと難儀なことですね。
Though the sister's tone was gentle, her words seemed somewhat indifferent. She lacked sight, but she guided it too with certainty in her step.
それで、奉仕の内容ですが。
分かってます。クリスマス前だし、面倒な掃除を済ませておきたいんでしょ？問題ありません。そういうの得意ですから。
It wasn't their strong suit as much as it was Sojiro's.
では、青子さんはかまどの方で聖兵の作り置きを。しずきさんは外に。私どもでは手の届かない箇所の清掃をお願いします。
ちょっと待って。台所にリツカのやついないでしょうね。こんなところであんなのに会うなんてごめんだから。
リツカは留守です。ですので、どうぞ気兼ねなく。
With a dismissive wave, Aoko headed toward the door in the back of the worship hall. As she had indicated, she was quite accustomed to this church.
しずきさんはこちらに。まずは物置から清掃道具を運んでいただきます。
The work entrusted to Sojiro did not require any particular skill. It was window cleaning at its most standard.
窓を全部拭けばいいんですね。
水拭きと空拭き、その後にコートスプレーもお願いします。はしごの高さは足りますか？
あれ、ちょっと足りないっぽいですね。
では届く範囲で結構ですので、よろしくお願いします。
Ooh, excuse me. After the brief exchange, the sister returned to the church. Sojiro began to wonder if it was out of distrust in him that she was being so curt. He understood that it was too soon to glean an answer from their first meeting, but then again, such answers always eluded Sojiro. Left alone but no less encouraged, Sojiro began cleaning the windows. That's a weird sound. That's better. The day's weather was a disappointment once again. It had not gone so far as to rain, but was too overcast to enjoy the sun. He leaned against a tall ladder and, beginning with a window about 5 yards from the ground, quietly cleaned. Sojiro was never the kind of person to mind physical labor. In fact, if there had been a blue sky, this might have been a perfect day off to him. By the time he finished his third or fourth window, he felt very relaxed and began to whistle. Though 15 feet was an intimidating height, it provided for a wonderful view at the same time. Turning toward the town gave Sojiro a clear view of the tree-topped hill that had previously caught his eye.
やっぱり林の中に家があるよな。
The hill in the woods just outside of town. From here, the forest overlooking the sleepless city looked like a foreign castle.
あれ？何泥棒さん？
Just then, lost in his thoughts while wiping windows, Sojin was pulled out of his trance by someone pacing below him. He looked down and saw a girl, her unkempt clothes otherwise contrasting with her kind visage.
でもちょっと怪盗には似合わないのんびり屋さん風に。どっちかっていうとあれかしら。暖炉から現れては微妙にいらないおもちゃを押し付けるセイントみたいな。うわぁ、私あのヒゲ苦手なのよね。だってどう見ても不法侵入者じゃないあの人。
Aren't you the nun? Aren't you someone different altogether? She looked to be in her late 20s. Despite the cold, she was not wearing a coat. She had no purse either, which was rather strange as a woman and her purse were never far apart. Not that Sojiro knew this truth quite yet. Based on the fact that none of this seemed to apply to her, one could have easily surmised that she herself was a little loosey-goosey. A few cars short of a full deck, one might also say.
あ、私ピンときたわ。君、ミサコのバイトの子？偉いわ。今時の高校生は業者さん顔負けなのね。
The girl looked up in admiration at Sojiro as he stood atop his ladder.
よーし、私も手伝っちゃおうかな。はしごはまだある？他の雑巾は？どうせだからホースで水をかけるのはどうかしら。こうバーッとケルヒャーとか叫びながら。バチ当たりだけど、それなら少しぐらいは楽しくなりそうじゃない？
Damn, she is really energetic. I like her. The girl let out a hearty laugh. Her smile glowed like a cactus had sprouted legs and begun to run about. Inasmuch as a running cactus could only cause trouble, as Sojiro anticipated, the girl began to clean without waiting for his approval.
いえ、教会の前を通ったら人影っぽいのが窓にへばりついてるのが見えちゃったの。昼間っから泥棒とか豪快だなーってちょっと興味惹かれちゃって。そしたら可愛い子が真面目に労働してたわけ。窓拭きの達人みたいにビッとかっこよく。そんなの見せられたら手伝いたくなるのが人情じゃない？
Wiping the window next to Sojiro, the girl continued to cheerfully chatter. Although this was all kinds of suspicious, Sojiro politely followed her lead, nodding and agreeing as she spoke. Perhaps it was an instinctive camaraderie. He sensed his girl was just like him, always getting the short end of the stick when it came to menial work.
あなたは教会の人なんですか？
私？いえ、ただの通りすがりよ。それよりあなたってのは他人行儀ね。君とは商店街で何度も会ってるのに。
What?
いや、会ってませんよ。
会ってます。君、魚達さんでバイトしてる子でしょ？今週だけでも何度か行ってるもん、私。私はそうね、花沢って言うんだけど、君の名前は？
Hanazawa took a quick glance at the flower bed below in the middle of her introduction, and gave him a friendly laugh. Sojiro's self-introduction, however, was his usual brand of awkward.
宗十郎さん、いい名前ね。古風な感じで。名前に数字が入ってるとなんか日本人って感じがしない？ここの神父さんとかシスターの名前知ってる？エイリとかユイカとか、なんか外国風なんだけど。
エイリさんはともかく、ユイカさんは綺麗な黒髪の女の人でしたよ。
あら、神父さんにはまだ会っていないのね。愛田教会の美形神父と美人姉妹って言ったら有名なんだけど。あ、そうか。さては君、最近引っ越してきたんでしょう。しかも一人暮らしと見たわ。
そうですけど、花沢さんすごいですね。さっきからあまりにも的確な当てずっぽうです。
いえいえ、推理と言ってくれたまえ。君ぐらいの子がアルバイトに精を出すほどこの町の娯楽は魅力的じゃないもの。遊ぶお金ならバイト一件で賄えちゃうわ。君は物欲のあるタイプじゃなさそうだし。となるとこれはもう生活費のためと考えるのが健全でしょ。まあ学生さんが生活費も学費も自分だけで賄うなんてのは健全じゃないんだけど。
いや、そうでもないですよ。働かざる者食うべからずです。
そっか。宗十郎さんは若いのに立派ね。私も学生の頃はバイト三昧だったから、少しは君の大変さもわかるわよ。
なんと花沢さんも一人暮らしだったんですか？
ええ、親の反対を押し切ってよその国に留学しちゃったの。あっちには友達もいたから下宿先には困らなかったけど、さすがに食費ぐらいは稼がないとね。けどまあ、こう見えて肉体労働は苦にならないタイプだし、学院もバイトも楽しい思い出になってるわ。
Sojiro nodded agreeably. Dignified or not, he could barely hold back the sense of solidarity that was swelling up within him.
これも何かの縁だし、魚達さんではこれからお世話になりそうだし、頼りないだろうけど相談事があったらぜひ言ってね。精神面で力になるわ。
ありがとうございます。じゃあ早速ですけど、ここは何をするところなんでしょう？
As Sojiro said here, he pointed at the church. Get ready, Hanazawa. Even Hanazawa was taken aback by his question. I mean, who wouldn't be? Hey, what do you do here? Points at church. Bro, you lost your mind, is what they would say in real life. Because who doesn't know how a church works? Unaware of Sojiro's provincial background, combined with her quick-witted nature, Hanazawa seemingly mistook his question for some kind of sophisticated wit.
そうね。心の安全を扱っているというのはどうかしら。いえ、安全というよりは鎧？継ぎはぎのバリケード？とにかく本人はちっとも鍛えられないってことは同じよね。
Wait, what? A way for people to avoid getting better.
あとはパンとワインも分けてくれるわね。
Wait, no, wait, uh-oh. He's gonna take that the wrong way.
無料でですか？
もちろん。止めるものは勝手に置いていくって話。あとは、そっか、これが一番大きいんだけど、収入に税金がかからない。心の安全は扱いが難しいけど、
きちんと売り物にできればノーリスクハイリターンよ。
はあ、よくわからないですけど、ピンチの時はここに転がり込めばいいんですね。
うん、それはおすすめしないな。ご利用は月に1回、気休め程度にした方がいいと思う。
The rag squeaked as the two carefully souls continued to wipe down the windows. Whistling as they went, they shined up one window, and another, and another.
そうだ、もう一つあります。ここから見えるあの森、何ですか？
森？あの山の上にある森のこと？
ですけど、あれは山じゃなくて丘と言うべきです。
As someone raised in the countryside, Sojiro's pride would not allow for a mound of dirt to be called a mountain.
そう？あれはあれで結構登るのに体力使うんだけど、ま、そっちの方がよりらしいわね。
It was as if a shadow fell over her now sunny disposition. She was undoubtedly a beautiful woman with very lovely features. But as Sojiro looked at her in that moment, her smile melted away, and he saw how disturbed she was at his comment. And when it comes down to it,
あれは丘です。それとほら、ここから煙突みたいなの見えますけど、あれは何ですか
？Sojiro was not one to closely watch people's reactions and fuss over his speech.
あれは本物の煙突よ。あの森は全部私有地なんだけど、その中にでっかい洋館が立っているの。でも私有地だから地元の人間も入ったことはないんじゃないかしら。通称久遠寺のお化け屋敷ってね。近所の皆さんは気味悪がってるし、あんまり近寄らない方がいいんじゃない？あんな小さな森なのに遭難したとか野犬が出るとか物騒な話には事書かないから。
Oh, so it is pronounced Kuonji.
野犬って都会にも野犬？
たくさんいるわよ。この教会の裏手の空き地にだっているし、ここの神父さんは物好きだからパンとかあげちゃって、それでワンちゃんの巡回ルートになっちゃってるんでしょうけど。とにかく君子危うきに近寄らずよ。あの森には入らないのが町のルールなの。そもそも私有地だし、入ったらおまわりさんを呼ばれちゃって、そのまま交番でお説教タイムなんてあんまり楽しくないでしょ。
Sojiro nodded along to her story as he stared at the far-off chimney from his vantage point on the ladder. A teeny tiny part of him was curious about that hill, because it reminded him of the woods where he grew up, but after reminding himself that it was none of his business, he returned to window washing. Thanks to Hanazawa leading a hand, they were able to finish the job without a hitch. Between the two of them, they had accomplished a simple but very time-consuming task.
はい、ご苦労様でした。あれだけ砂まみれだった窓が見違えたわね。どう？これから適当なサテンでお茶にしない？宗十郎さんの仕事っぷりに敬意を表して、私がおご。
はい、何か言いました？花沢さん。
いや、ごめんなさい。休養を思い出しちゃった。花沢さんはここで失礼するのでした。チャオ。
By the time Sojiro, who had started putting away the ladder, turned around, he was only able to catch a glimpse of the girl's figure dashing toward the street at a lightning speed. It was just before 3 o'clock. More than 3 hours had passed since Hanazawa offered to help. Sojiro watched the girl with many strange faces disappear. For someone who seemed to have been on the aimless walk, Hanazawa had spent a good deal of time with him. Maybe helping Sojiro out reminded her of something she needed to do.
しずきくん、そっちにいるの？
The student council president popped her head out from the corner of the church.
あ、声かけてごめん。いいから作業に専念。
The sight of Sojiro putting away a ladder taller than himself seemed to have provoked an emotional response in Aoko. Then, in an instant, she rolled up her sleeves and began to approach him.
Oh.
The surprise was more than Aoko's sudden appearance. Ignoring Sojiro's bewilderment, Aoko promptly began issuing orders.
はしご、横に倒していいわよ。下の方は私が持つから、あなたは上の方をお願い。
She did all this so matter-of-factly that Sojiro began lowering the ladder before he even had a chance to insist that he could do it by himself. With work finished and the sister's thank you gifts in hand, the two... Oh, my vision. The two put the church behind them. Since Aoko apparently had something to do around the station, they say they would walk together until they got there.
でも、本当にアルバイト慣れしてるのね。
Beneath the orange, thinner sky, Aoko spoke more as though she was only expressing her thoughts out loud than striking up a conversation.
そうか。青崎から見てそうなら少しは嬉しいな。
Sojiro gave her an earnest smile. But then again, he had been beaming ever since he received his pay, so the source of his pay joy was not so clear.
あのね、あなたは普段が問題ばっかりなんだから、あんまり調子に乗らないように。差し引きゼロっていうか、まだまだマイナスなんだから。
うん。学校のことは言われると悲しくなる。
Sojiro hung his head dejectedly. Even if his job had been going well, school was still a bust. Exams were one thing, but even classwork was something he had found himself failing behind it.
青崎は成績悪いやつは嫌いか？
まあ、頭というか巡りの悪い人との話は疲れるでしょうね。でも、あなたはそれ以前だし、そもそも私にはこれっぽっちも関係ないし。でっかいハンデを何とかするのは先生たちの仕事で、それに応えるのはあなたの役目。アルバイトもいいけど、帰ったらきちんと予習やっときなさいよ。
それはもちろん。学校の人たちはみんないい人だ。
そうならいいけど、みんないい人？
Aoko cocked her head to one side, unsure how this exchange had resulted in that response. She decided to interrupt it as Sojiro simply expressing his gratitude in his own particular way.
ところで、参考までに聞くんだけど、あなた他にどんなバイトしてるの？
どこって商店街が多い。魚のお店とか花の店とか。あ、でも昨日は隣町まで遠出したな。遊園地のアルバイト。
Since Sione's school-authorized locations were in the Misaki shopping district, her response was much as she expected. That is, except for the decidedly unexpected last part.
遊園地ってヤシラギの？
そう。使わなくなった看板とかオブジェとか解体して運び出したんだ。さすがに疲れたな、あれは。
へえ、うん、それは体力勝負でしょうね。
This left Aoko rather impressed. Transporting unused amusement park machinery was not a job that students did willingly during their free time.
でもいいな。私、キッチーランドって一度も行ったことないの。三崎町に住んでるのに。
Aoko looked up in the direction of the neighboring town. From here, you could just barely make out the Ferris wheel. The round steel frame with the wheel, illuminated by the sunset as it was reminiscent of an old gravestone.
そうか。それは金銭的な理由で。
Aoko had to stifle her laughter. She knew it would be rude to Shojiro to burst out laughing, but the remark tickled her funny bone.
そういうんじゃなくて、単純にあれが開園してから立て込んでて遊びに行く暇がなかっただけよ。お金で解決する問題だったらそれこそ今すぐに行ってるわ。
Aoko showed Sojiro that envelope that contained the pay for the church. There was nothing sinister about her remark and gesture, but that she did not jump at the chance to go made Sojiro sad.
それなら今度行けばいいじゃないか。
ありがとう。けどそれは無理な話。あんたのことだから気づいていないと思うけど、あれ潰れてるのよ。廃園になってからもう2年以上経つんじゃない？
なんと。
It was no wonder there were no customers all the time he was there. Exasperated as she was at Sojiro, the student council president seemed to be enjoying herself. At this point, she'll be yelling things at Sojiro like, "I can't believe you didn't know that!" But this time, this evening, this one and only evening, she found it charming. Wait, did I read that part? Oh, I'm starting to fall asleep. Please hurry. I need this to end. Oh well. They parted ways, and Sojiro returned home to his apartment, immersed himself in his studies, and before he knew it, it was time to go to bed. To work. The major cultural difference, though certainly not the only point of difference, between city and country was the use of time. It did not matter what part of the city he was in, time flowed far too quickly here. Failing to squeeze even a drop of knowledge from his textbooks, he put them away for the day before heading out of town. The night grew deeper as today turned into tomorrow. Sojiro reversed his collar to protect his neck from the bitter cold and began to make his way back home. Not a soul to be seen, no dogs scrounging for food. No late-night shoppers. Why would there be? The solitary convenience store in the area closed at 11 o'clock. He mustered what little energy he had to take in an especially deep breath. Man-made landmarks lined the deserted street. Garish blue fluorescent light, brighter than the stars above, illuminated into darkness. An unconscious sense of anxiety stirred within him.
情けない。夜が怖いのは当たり前じゃないか。
chill crept up his spine as he attempted to mask his weakness with words. Stay out of the dark. Stay away from deserted places. Whether it was for some deeper reason, perhaps the fact that he looked so helpless. Everybody he had met in his life seemed to warn him of those things.
そうは言ってもしょうがないし、大体
What did that even mean, stay out of the dark? Nowhere in the city was without light. Everywhere, from the bustling train station to the remote residential areas, was illuminated by artificial light, not least the main railroads. Scary was scary, but this kind of fear was of a different sort than what he felt in the mountains. The most likely source of his fear was the fact that this place was governed by starkly different rules. The way in which the city meted out justice was terribly imbalanced. And to the provincial Sojiro, his lack of familiarity with the laws of the land terrified him far more than the dark. In the mountains, retribution came swiftly to those who broke the rules. Take a game trial, for example. Those who unwittingly trespass on the Animal Kingdom's domain world would, as a matter of course, be savaged by the native wildlife. Accordingly, in Sojiro's mind, an offender paid the price for one's mistakes immediately. It was not a matter of time who punished whom. It was simply that the one who broke the rules would meet instant, tangible retribution. He felt that, in this regard, the laws of the city were far too ambiguous. One couldn't meet their demise without ever knowing whether one was in the right or wrong.
けど、基本的には変わらないんだよな、多分。
To put it simply, retribution was delayed. To take the analogy to a step further, home in his village, no one individual had given the responsibility of maintaining order. In the city, however, someone was put in charge of punishing lawbreakers on behalf of the kind-hearted citizens who lived there. While crime and punishment in the mountains were synonymous, in the city the two were separated, and a related person brought judgment after the crime had been committed. Entering places that must not be entered, seeing things that must not be seen. Breaking a law had consequences. Someone will come to exact justice for the law that was broken. The result of all this was that the safest way to survive the city was not to stick your nose in the affairs of others. When the people who cared about Sojiro told him to stay away, they probably meant, if you don't, nobody will be able to help you.
といけない。また近道しそうになった。
No matter how much of a nuisance these obstacles were, one could not just climb over a neighbor's fence, even when one's apartment was just the other side. If the people inside happened to be awake and call the police, nobody would lift a hand to help them. With his misguided view of the city, Sojiro once again ended his day in peace. Unable to fall asleep right away, he gazed out his window upon the night sky from the floor of his apartment. The cityscape had caused him to tremble in fear when he first moved here. The convenience of solving almost any problem with the flip of a switch. The novelty of living a wall away from a complete stranger. It all disappeared in the night sky when he looked up. Unconsciously, he recalled his own words. What dim stars. What a cramped sky. Here there were no starry nights. Could he even survive here? The same misgivings since his first night continued to haunt him. His eyelids fell shut. Although he was fraught with worry, Sojiro's body felt the fatigue from his work and studies, and thus he fell fast asleep. Oh, I got an achievement. Oh, just read 1.5. Okay. Well, not only have we caught up, we have also finished chapter 1.5. And next time on stream, I'll be reading chapter 2. This went on for 3.5 hours. Thank God my Twitch didn't die. That would have been terrible again. Well, thank you for staying to the end. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. And hope you have a good night or morning or afternoon, depending on your time zone. And either or, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. With that, good night and see you later. And now find my controller because this thing is not working. Good night and take care.